Good day to be a Longhorn, bad day to be a T. Higgins owner. But honestly, we just got a ridiculous amount of news. So I want to go through everything that we weren't able to cover in the live stream earlier today. Ladd McConkey is officially expected to play week 8. Am I excited to start him? Probably not. I mean, I literally have him in the flock league. I'm going to be benching him in favor of guys like Javonte Williams, James Conner, Devonta Smith. Deebo Samuel is expected to play in week 8. So all of a sudden, obviously move Deebo Samuel up your rankings. And at the same time, you're going to be moving down the expectations that you have specifically for Ricky Pearsall. Like, actually, let me go ahead and let me update my rankings now because that is something that does change for me. So let's go over to the site. Let's pull up our week 8 rankings and let's see where we put Deebo Samuel now. I mean, obviously it's not great, Deebo having pneumonia. It's hard to know exactly what we should expect, but ultimately at the end of the day, you are the wide receiver 1 in what should be one of the best offenses in the league and a plus matchup with no brains and Ayuk. So for me, I think we would be moving Deebo Samuel at minimum to be a top 12 receiver. I think when Deebo's fully healthy coming out of the bye, I actually may make the argument to move him a little bit higher than this. However, it is going to be difficult for me to go through and do that right now just because I personally don't know if he is going to have any limitations with the pneumonia, with the wrist. With Ricky Pearsall, I still think you 100% roster the dude, of course. And if you were interested in playing him, you for sure can. But for me, I would probably rather have the guys like Judy, Pittman, Myers that have the path to be the wide receiver 1s in their own respective offenses. I would probably be putting Pearsall down here at about 42. But I do want to reiterate, you are not really excited to play him, but you're excited to see what happens and then maybe play him the next week. Now, this was surprising to me here. DK Metcalf will try to do a pregame workout, but remains doubtful for week 8. Obviously, I'm still expecting DK Metcalf's going to miss this week. But maybe this gives you a little bit of hope that DK Metcalf is able to be good to go in week 9, where, we were just talking about my expectation was with Metcalf that he possibly missed week 8 and week 9 as well. Zay Flowers considered a game time decision. It doesn't really change what we were looking at previously, but T. Higgins has a real chance to miss week 8. This is scary because obviously Higgins has a history of being downgraded late in the week and then all of a sudden and not being good to go. For me, obviously we will get news and we will get updated relatively soon with Higgins. This is going to be the early slate of games. But at minimum, I think you have to put Higgins behind the guys like JSN, Devonta Smith, DJ Moore, even if he does play, expecting that he could potentially be limited. And obviously, if Higgins is actually officially ruled out, then at that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move Yoshivash up and Higgins down. For me, I still expect that Higgins is probably good to go. But I know previously in the live stream, we kind of disregarded the possibility of him missing this week, which looks like it is a very real possibility. And then outside of that, all these other old news reports we already talked about in the live stream earlier today. So we can revisit as we answer these questions. I just don't want to spend too much time looking at it. And let me submit these rankings so they are updated on the site. And let's go back over to the site so we can make sure we are getting through all your questions here. First question is going to be coming out from D. Nickel. This is a start set where we're looking at Kyler at quarterback, running back Gibbs, Taylor, wide receiver. We have Diggs locked in. And then here for the second wide receiver slot, I think it's actually very easy for me to just go ahead and jam in Amari Cooper. With Amari, last week it was a tough play just because you didn't know what the snaps were going to look like with him being the late arrival to Buffalo. Now I'm a lot more confident in saying that he could get up to 70-75% of route participation in this offense. Going over to tight end, never mind. We have McBride. I was ready to just log and load David Njoku as a must-start guy every single week, but obviously McBride is just an absolute crusher in his own right. And then going down to the flex, this is something that will be interesting, and you can kind of go back and forth here, specifically between Tony Pollard as well as Jalen Waddle. Now, I personally am really hoping that Waddle comes out and crushes this week with Tua back in. He definitely has the better matchup. He's definitely in the better offense. The thing is, you do just have the guaranteed targets and the guaranteed carries going over to Tony Pollard with no Tajee Spears. So it's not the easiest scenario for me. I have Waddle at 34 and Pollard at 36 in my flex rankings this week. We can go over and we can look at the underdog picks to see what they have. Right now, you have Waddle currently sitting at higher, lower 50.5 receiving yards, higher, lower 9.75 points in comparison to Tony Pollard at higher, lower 85.5 total yards, higher, lower 11.55 points. I think you probably get the higher floor with just the running back that's going to get the guaranteed usage, maybe the higher ceiling with Pollard. Based off how strong this team looks throughout, I think you are fine to just go ahead and lock in Pollard, even though it's an absolute garbage offense, even though it's a garbage matchup. But when you have no Spears, he is averaging over 20 opportunities a game here. So I think you're going to go ahead. You're probably going to be playing Pollard. And of course, if y'all wanted to check out any of those underdog picks, you can go to the link in the live chat, the link in the description. If you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. And also, I'd highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have on Underdog this week specifically, because I actually hooked y'all up with the free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard for the Monday night game. And on top of that, this is just for anybody who's ever used code FLOCK. It doesn't matter if it was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, yesterday, today, or tomorrow. As long as you use code FLOCK, you're going to get that free Malik Neighbors pick. If you're new to Underdog, you'll get an additional free Dak Prescott pick, more than less than half a total yard for tomorrow night, and a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. And on top of that, you're going to be getting a free team review in the live streams that we're doing every night. So make sure you take advantage of it. Moving over to our next question. This one coming out from Dill Shifty. This is one of those free Underdog team reviews. Thank you for taking advantage of that offer, my friend. Says, hey, Mason, I feel I have a decent team and needed to know where we can go from here. I've tried to trade Kareem in a piece for a better running back rest of season, but no luck. Any advice? So this team name is Three Thugs Thuggin. We are right now 4th in the league analyzer. We are, a ways back from the top 3 teams who kind of look like they are juggernauts. And a team at 3 as, here's what I've heard. The rumor on the street is anybody named Mason is damn good at fantasy football. And it's going to be tough to take them down. Not surprised at all that Mason's team here does have a top 3 ranking in the league analyzer. That team's probably a juggernaut, and that owner probably plays great defense as well. But nonetheless, looking at our roster, this is a start 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, 10-team format. So this is a situation in which the depth simply doesn't really matter here. And the main thing that does matter is us going through and chasing the highest ceiling we possibly can, especially there at wide receiver. I mean, if you can take any wide receiver depth piece and move them in a 2-for-1 deal and go get an upgrade elsewhere, personally, that's what I would be looking to do in this format every single day of the week. We are sitting currently with Josh Allen at quarterback. Obviously, Allen, top 5 quarterback rest of season. We can start him every single week, regardless of matchup. No hesitation whatsoever. Don't need to roster another. Going over to running back, this is a little bit of an interesting scenario where we have Brees, so we have the top 5 play. But outside of that, we have a very solid option in the short term with Kareem Hunt. Rico Dowdle, but anyway, with Hunt, you do have to be concerned about the possibility of Pacheco coming in late in the season and all of a sudden Hunt going to 0. Rico Dowdle as well. I still expect him to be the starter here in Dallas, but there is the outside chance that Dalvin Cook comes in. Dalvin Cook sees 20-30% of this backfield. And if that does happen, it probably makes Dowdle an option that would be very difficult to put in your starting lineup. So here, when it comes to the running back 2 slot, for now, obviously we're fine because Hunt's cruising. But if Pacheco does come back, I really think that you are going to be in a decent amount of trouble here. Going over to wide receiver, we are sitting with an elite option with Tyreek. Obviously, it will be much better now that Tua is back in. We have Devonta Smith here as a strong wide receiver 2. Amari Cooper is a strong wide receiver 2. DeAndre Hopkins now giving some upside in KC. And then even beyond this, we have Worthy, we have Rome, we have Ladd, these guys that can continue to get better as the season goes on. So honestly, what I would look to do with this team, and I think it's kind of a no-brainer here, is I would love to go through and make a 2-for-1 trade where if we can trade away maybe that wide receiver depth piece that we personally don't need, where if you can go through and you can look to potentially move off of DeAndre Hopkins as well as Rico Dowdle to go get that running back upgrade inside the starting lineup, I think it'd be an absolute no-brainer. Because obviously going over to what we have on the waiver wire, you have somebody like Ricky Pearsall that you can pick up for just completely free. So I would love to make that 2-for-1 deal, sell Hopkins and one of the depth running backs, go get a locked and loaded RB2 here rest of season. We're going to be fine at wide receiver pretty much regardless. And also, since this is a 4-3 roster where we are really strong, we're probably thinking more so long-term. And for the long term, a lot of these rookie receivers should continue to get better as well. And then obviously at tight end, we have Kelsey. I mean, already through his bye, a tight end that we can start every single week. It's crazy that Cade Otton's still on the waiver wire, given the fact that you do have the injuries to both Godwin and Evans. But ultimately, I think you are chilling here. The only thing I would say is if we can sell the wide receiver depth piece, I think Hopkins is going to be the guy most people are interested in with a running back and go get that RB upgrade. I think that'd be a phenomenal move, but I really appreciate you. Thank you again for taking advantage of that underdog offer. I really hope I was able to help you out in some way here, my friend. Now, moving over to our next question. This is another free underdog team review that's coming out from Elijah Bryant. Says, hey, Mason, appreciate all your content. Wish you all the best. Trying to see your insight for this season. It says it's a dynasty, but it's just a 3-person keeper. Let me know if there's anything we can do. Thank you, my guy. Really appreciate you. And I actually think that we fixed this issue for you, hopefully, going into the future, where in the future it will show that this is actually a keeper format. And if you want to confirm that this is fixed with me, if you could go through and if you could shoot me either an email, or just literally once I complete this, you're going to get an email from me that's automated that says, hey, I just completed your review. Go through this link so you can see it. If you can reply to that email, say, hey, Mason, this is Elijah. I had the keeper league. Here's my sleeper ID, and I can go through and make sure that we get this changed with the developers for you. That way it shows that it's a keeper, not a dynasty league. I would love to figure that out for you. Well, I mean, if that fix isn't out by now, it should be today or tomorrow. But this is Tucker Wright in the Pooh. I've not heard that team name before, but it is interesting. Now, obviously, League Analyzer ain't really going to help us here in terms of ranking these players because the rankings you're going to see alongside these names are dynasty rankings. So you can look at them, you can ignore them. They're really not going to have much of an impact at all. 3-player keeper league, you just treat it like it's a redraft format. Like you are always going to have 3 players that you're interested to keep. You're never going to think, oh, okay, well, I wanted to make this move, but Ladd McConkey is more interesting in 2025 than Amari Cooper. Obviously in Dynasty, that matters a ton. But in a 3-player keeper league where you're always going to have 3 guys that you are excited to keep, it honestly just has no impact at all. Sitting here at quarterback, we are elite. I mean, we have Jalen Hurts, somebody that we can start every single week regardless of matchup, already through his bye week as well. If you had great options on the waiver wire, I wouldn't mind if you wanted to go out there and actually drop Geno Smith and pick up another quarterback off of waivers. But honestly, for you, this does look like it's probably a deeper league in general where your waiver wire is not going to be loaded with a bunch of options. Going over to running back with Kyron Williams as well as James Cook. These are 2 running backs that we can project out as a high-end RB1 rest of season and then a low-end RB1 rest of season. I think you should be very excited about both these names. Rashad White, J.K. Dobbins, great depth assets as well here. And then going through, we picked up Dalvin. I'm not going to fault you, of course, for picking up Dalvin. Definitely not starting him or anything, but Ultimately, it's a great running back room where we have plenty of depth. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. So I prefer to build around the running back depth than I do the wide receiver depth. Going over to receiver, we have Chase. Obviously, elite wide receiver 1, probably going to be our keeper next season. But more so this year, what we care about, obviously, is the fact that this is somebody that you can comfortably project out as a wide receiver 1 every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. Rashee Rice, maybe you're interested in keeping him next year. Maybe you're not. I'd say if it was like a keeper league that you kept 6-7 guys, obviously, yes. But the issue is what happens if next season Rashee Rice gets hit with a 6-game suspension coming off a serious injury. At that point, is he worth one of your top 3 keeper slots? We have Pickens, we have the Godwin injury, we have Amari and Hopkins to backfill in as well. Going over to tight end, we have Dallas Goedert. Here's what I would do with your league. Obviously, it's a very strong roster. We have multiple running back ones. We have an elite wide receiver 1. We have great wide receiver depth. We have great running back depth. We have an elite quarterback. David Njoku looks like he's an absolute crusher going into the future. Really, the only thing that I would look to do is see if we can find a team in your league that's possibly pivoting over to play for 2025 if they think that they need to start trading for some of these keeper assets. And if we can convince them to go out there and pay up for one of the guys that we won't have rest of season, whether that's an option like Chris Godwin, whether that's an option like Rashee Rice, like this team here that's 1-6. If you could somehow get into their head, we're obviously like in dynasty fantasy football, you'd rather have Rashee Rice than Deebo Samuel rest of season. I'm sorry, not rest of season. The exact opposite of rest of season, but rest of their careers. But specifically here in this keeper league where, like I said, you're really taking it season by season. You're not trying to project out for the long term. And at the same time, with Rice coming off serious injury and with the potential looming suspension, obviously every keeper league's different, but if your keeper league's one where the teams that are 1-6 are willing to go out there and say, oh, okay, yeah, let me play for 2025, I would love to try to convince them to send you one of these veteran older receivers that are going to be productive right now for one of the guys that we have injured and will be out rest of season, such as Rashee Rice, Chris Godwin. I would legitimately just send him a message going, hey, I don't know if you would be more interested in Deebo Samuel than Deebo Samuel or Rashee Rice in 2025 and beyond. I see that you're 1-6. I'm sure you're thinking about next year. If we can send him that message and try to make that swap, I think that would be really advantageous for us. We can try the same thing with the 2-5 team. The issue with the 2-5 team is they don't have too many assets that are super interesting here. Obviously, they're going to tell you to F off if you ask for neighbors. This 2-5 team has Stephon Diggs. So maybe and they just lost Brandon Ayuk. So maybe we can go through and for Diggs, we can kind of send that same offer that we were thinking for Deebo and just try to cash out on that long-term keeper upside to get that additional wide receiver in that can really help us this season from one of those teams that looks like they may need to just go ahead and burn it down and play for 2025 and beyond. That's the move I'd be looking to make. Obviously, it's hard to come up with much with this team. I think you have an extremely strong roster. But obviously, the wide receiver injuries are going to hurt us going into the future. So if you wanted to make that pivot, I think it would make a ton of sense. It just comes down to, is your league the type of league where people are willing to go out there and trade for that long-term upside and sacrifice the short-term production? But I really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. And again, if you're going to respond to that automated email or shoot me a message on Discord, I'm trying to think if those are the only 2 ways you're going to get a hold of me. If you can send me a message going, hey man, I had the keeper sleeper league. Here's my league ID. Can you make sure this is fixed for me? I'd be super happy to get that done. But thank you again. Really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way. But Stanton coming out with a free Underdog team review as well. This is, yo Mason, any moves or trades you think we should be making to help the team? I have plenty of wide receiver depth, but we'll be losing Mason since CMC's coming back. Thanks. Thank you. This is Kid Who Got Caged. Very interesting team name. We are currently 3rd in the league analyzer. There is a pretty significant drop off to the teams at the bottom. The teams at the bottom have absolutely no shot to do anything here. This is a 10-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. So Wide receiver depth doesn't matter at all. Wide receiver floors don't matter at all. Really, the only thing that matters is chasing the highest ceiling possible, going out there, making 2-for-1 deals, trying to get the improvements where we can. Starting off quarterback, we are rolling with Lamar. Obviously, when we have Lamar, we can start him every single week, regardless of matchup. Don't need a backup quarterback. Lamar does have the week 14 bye, though, so I understand maybe wanting to hold on to Dak Prescott. My thought process with this is for the week 14 bye, we could just literally just stream it. Goff, Darnold, Stafford, Richardson, Tua, May are out there on waivers. It's not like Dak's in a tier in which he's significantly better than the streaming quarterbacks, regardless of the matchup that he's in. No, I think it's kind of a matchup-based thing here, to be completely honest. So for me, I think that if there are other interesting options on the waiver wire that you wanted, which the most interesting player in my mind would be Braylon Allen, just given the fact that if we're looking at the bottom end of our roster in a league like this, we are trying to find the next Jordan Mason, because when you hit on Jordan Mason, it just gives you a massive, massive bump. I mean, if Brees goes down, Braylon Allen probably turns into an RB1, right? Probably turns into a week-to-week play, regardless of the matchup that he's in. Trying to think if there's any other interesting waiver wire move. Honestly, not really. It does seem like your league mates kind of are on top of the waiver wire, specifically with this being a 10-team format. A little bit surprised. Going over to wide receiver, I mean, we have a couple guys that we can start every single week regardless, right? I mean, you have somebody like Justin Jefferson, absolute crusher. Garrett Wilson, strong wide receiver 2. Jalen Waddle, phenomenal wide receiver 3. Devonta Smith, great wide receiver. T. Higgins, great option. So this is an insane wide receiver room, particularly where the depth is a little out of control. So, I mean, in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, 10-team format, this is typically the trade that we kind of always want to make. But especially with your team in particular, I mean, if you were to be able to go through and potentially make a 2-for-1 tier up at receiver, where if we could find somebody that needs some help with wide receiver depth, and if we could just go ahead and offer them, say, Garrett Wilson and Devonta Smith, Garrett Wilson and T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson and Darnell Mooney, to pivot over to that top end wide receiver 1, I think it make a lot of sense. Obviously, we're going to have to target a team or two that just lost a couple players due to injury. But in a 10-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, there won't be many teams that need to go out there and give you that upgrade. This team here is 2-5. They are sitting with Harrison as their wide receiver 1, Pickens wide receiver 2, Addison wide receiver 3 in a 10-team format. So their wide receiver room's pretty trash. I mean, if possible, and obviously I understand that this is much easier said than done, if we could give them a wide receiver depth piece, like Waddle or like Smith, like Wilson, like Higgins, like Mooney, any of these guys, it doesn't matter. And Brian Robinson to pivot over and get that true elite level running back in Breece Hall. Like, you could maybe see a world where we send them Brian Robinson and Garrett Wilson, and they're willing to give us Breece in return. Specifically when their wide receiver room's this bad. I would love to throw that feeler out, see if it's something that we could potentially get done. And then also another thing that you could look to do is see if we can find a team that potentially needs some help, a receiver, but has a strong tight end. Like this team here has Diggs, JSN, Keenan Allen as their top 3 and only 3 wide receivers. Whereas they have a very strong tight end position where they are sitting here with Kelsey and Cade Otton. I mean, if you could potentially send them a wide receiver and Evan Ingram, say send them Darnell Mooney and Evan Ingram and pivot over to Kelsey, which in my mind, I still do believe that is an upgrade rest of season. I'm definitely not trading Wilson and Evan Ingram or anything like that to go get Kelsey. But if it's one of our lower tier options, I think it could be interesting. I think that's another play that we could look to make. Obviously, I'd be more interested in the teams that maybe have a stronger tight end than Kelsey at this point. Somebody like Bowers, somebody like Kittle. But the issue is with those teams that have the extremely strong tight ends, do they really need that wide receiver help? This team has Chase, Debo, Amari. We can offer it to the Bowers team and see what they say. We can offer it to the McBride team and see what they say. But the reality is they're probably chilling at wide receiver. But yeah, no matter what we're looking to do with this team, it all hinges around the idea that we can only start 3 receivers weekly. However, we have like 6 wide receivers who have a considerable amount of value here. So, I mean, if you could go through, if you could pivot from a receiver depth piece and go get that upgrade inside the starting lineup, that's my preferred path with this team. But I really hope I was able to help you out again. Thank you so much for taking advantage of that underdog offer. And yeah, I'm wishing you the best of luck for this season. Now, Imbro's coming out with our next question. This is James Conner, Trey Benson versus Jonathan Brooks. This is going to be the James Conner side for me kind of easily. Brooks still not back yet. Brooks still in a garbage offense. I mean, if this is a dynasty format, then maybe you can have that conversation. Let me just confirm. Is this a dynasty league? It'd be a pretty shallow dynasty league if it was one. Yeah, honestly, with how shallow this league is in terms of the amount of starting lineup, the amount of roster spots you have, I honestly wouldn't even treat it as if it was a full dynasty format regardless. So I think you go ahead. I think you get Cook and Benson, even if it is that format where we need to think about 2025 and beyond. There's still some upside with Benson. And the issue is, specifically, if you're looking at Jonathan Brooks, what is the path for this Carolina Panthers offense to improve? As right now, I just simply don't see it. Now, moving over to our next question, coming out from Mikkel. Here, second quarterback is a super flex spot. Gotcha. 99% of the time, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to jam in either Anthony Richardson or Russell Wilson. I know people are going to hate this. I will go A-Rich if it's a 4-point passing touchdown format. Even if Russ, the better real-life quarterback, I think A-Rich gives you the rushing upside. We're going to be going with Mixon and Henry as must-start running backs every single week, regardless of the matchup. Lamb and Diggs as must-start wide receivers every week, regardless of the matchup, assuming you have no Nico. And then going down to tight end, we play Evan Ingram. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal team. I actually probably just want to play both running backs here in Brian Robinson and Kareem Hunt, considering the fact that you are just sitting with the best team in this league, in my mind. Like, if you're looking at the receivers like Jaden Reed, I think you make an argument that Reed potentially has higher ceiling than what you're going to get with Kareem Hunt, but you have a wider range of outcomes with the receivers in general. Whereas with the running backs, when you have the guaranteed opportunities, I think you just kind of go with the guaranteed touches that you have down here at the bottom. So I would go ahead. I would take Robinson and Hunt, to be honest. Now, Beakerman coming out with a free underdog team review says, how do I look going forward? Lost Rice and got Andrews from the waiver wire. Appreciate you, my guy. Team is Ball So Hard University. We're still number 2 in the league analyzer, regardless of us losing Rashee Rice. It's a 12-team format where we start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. I can tell you the first thing that we do, and I have noticed this with a decent amount of leagues that we've looked at, that Rome Odunze will be sitting out there on the waiver wire. Honestly, I think you have some pretty good waiver wire options considering how garbage some of the bottom pieces on our roster are. I think the first thing that I do before we even look at any positions, before we make any trades, and what will make this team so much better and possibly push it to the best team in this league, we go through and we drop Alan Lazard, you drop Quentin Johnston, you hurry your butt over to the waiver wire, and we pick up Rome Odunze and Josh Downs before anybody else can get to him. In my mind, that would be the absolute no-brainer pivot. I would absolutely love that. Obviously, looking at this position by position, quarterback, we are effectively streaming. We have Goff, we have Darnold. In this range, we are just going to be playing the matchups between the 2 guys. It's not like either quarterback here is a locked and loaded starter, regardless of what their matchup is. Both great real life quarterbacks, both playing out of their minds so far this season. But at the same time, we just simply have no rushing upside, right? So for fantasy football purposes, it is a little bit different. Going over to what we have specifically at running back, we have Kyron, top 5 RB rest of season. We have Achan, low end RB1 rest of season. We have Dobbins, incredibly strong running back too. We have Brooks for long-term upside. We have Roshan as an interesting upside play if you were to get an injury specifically to Swift. Going over to waivers at running back. In my mind, I think I'd potentially see a higher ceiling with Ray Davis in comparison to Kamani Vidal. I understand the thought process maybe here wanting Vidal in that. We have Dobbins. Dobbins has the injury history. But, I mean, we've already seen what the role looks like specifically for Ray Davis in the event in which you have no James Cook, and there Ray Davis leaps into a 20-plus opportunity game in one of the best offenses in the league. So I would probably drop Vidal. I would pick up Davis. Going over to receiver, we have St. Brown, Debo, both of whom could presumably be, wide receiver ones, high-end wide receiver ones rest of season post Brandon Ayuk injury. Jameson, wide receiver 3, wide receiver depth's a little bit shaky, but it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format, running back strong enough where it frankly doesn't really matter what we are going to be doing down in the flex receiver because we're going to be able to start a wide receiver in the flex every week regardless. So what I would do here is I would make the pivot, drop Johnston, Lazard, pick up Downs and Rome, make the pivot with the waiver wire at running back, and specifically in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league where we're not necessarily optimizing for wide receiver depth, and instead we are just trying to optimize for upside there at, running back. I think honestly, another thing that you could do is if Jonathan Brooks comes back maybe next week and all of a sudden he looks like he does have a decent amount of value, then at that point you could potentially go through and look to sell Jonathan Brooks and a quarterback like Goff or Darnold in a 2-for-1 deal to go get a significant upgrade there. If we're stretching, trying to find something for you to do here other than just the waiver wire plays. But I think the waiver wire plays by themselves are going to make this team a lot better. And obviously it's a very strong roster as is. Can't even imagine it with another top 3 receiver in Rashee Rice. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way. Again, thank you so much for taking advantage of that Underdog promo. And I'm wishing you luck this year, but honestly, I don't think you really need it. But let's move this over. We have a bunch of start-sit questions to get to. And I do want to remind y'all, of course, if you ever wanted to ask any questions on this live stream, you can go hit the button in the live chat that says ask a question here. That will take you over to flockfantasy.com. If you just wanted to go on a different computer and type in flockfantasy.com, you can hit the button in the top right corner that says expert advice. There you can ask a super message, start sit question, trade question, or team review. If you wanted a full-blown team review, I would highly recommend taking advantage of the free promo that we have on Underdog, which is what everybody else is pretty much doing. It's because it's what I'd recommend. It's honestly cheaper, way better deal. And also, especially this week, because y'all are actually getting hooked up with a free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard as well. This is regardless of if you signed up to Underdog 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, yesterday, today, or tomorrow. As long as you use code FLOCK, you are going to get this. And at the same time, you'll get a free Dak Prescott pick, more than less than half a total yard, a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000, and a free team review in the live stream that we are doing every single day. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your Underdog Fantasy account. That way I'm able to credit you with that free team review voucher the following day when Underdog sends me your email address. Now, Adam coming over with our next start sit question. Here, we need to choose the tight end. I think we go Pitts. If you actually look at Pitts, it's a little surprising to see the consistency that we've had over the past month or so, specifically with the target volume that he's had. Going over to the flex, we are looking at ETN Bigsby, where we simply just don't know the situation here yet. We have no CMC. We have no Jennings. Addison's already played. So honestly, kind of regardless, I'm going to go ahead. I will play Tank Bigsby in the flex spot. I'm going to play him over Downs, regardless of if ETN's good or not. But the clear hope here is that Travis Etienne does not play, because then in that case, it's a lot easier to project Tank Bigsby to get to 20 plus opportunities. Now, Robert coming out with our next start sit question says, with the injuries to Tampa, not sure if we should start Baker. The waiver wire is thin at quarterback. I would still start Baker over Lawrence in particular. So my view with Baker is he goes from being the must-start quarterback every single week. That was a top 3 option through the first half of the season. I think he was the second player in fantasy football in total points scored. He was nuts. I think he falls now without Evans or Godwin to being a borderline streaming quarterback. I think he's closer to the range of the guys like Geno Smith, where it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, obviously you have a week-to-week ceiling there, but you're not exactly wanting to play him unless he's in a great matchup. That's how I'm kind of viewing Baker at this point. You do still have a little bit of rushing upside, which is the saving grace for Baker Mayfield. Him versus Lawrence, though, I don't think we can get there with Lawrence. I'm going over to the flex. Jaden Reed's just going to be the play. Actually, I spoke before seeing all the players. Amari Cooper will be the play. Jaden Reed, I just don't think we can comfortably project him out to see the target volume that Amari is going to have in Buffalo. Amari obviously got there with the touchdown last week, but that was off of limited snaps. I think the snap rate's going to go dramatically up for Amari Cooper another week into this offense. And I think this could be an environment in which it's actually a pretty high-scoring game against the Seattle Seahawks. So, Jaden Reed's completely fine. The issue is with Reed, you have one game all season with more than 6 targets. So you are a lot more boom bust. And I think we've seen over a large sample that it's not like we can easily project him out to have the target volume of a true alpha 1. But Heifer out here, always happy to see us, says, this says Superflex and Single Flex League. Need help picking my quarterbacks and flex. Thanks for all the help over the last 4 years. Thank you so much for sticking with us for so damn long. Let me hook you up with a free start set question voucher. That way next time you send one in, it is free for you, my guy. Here, looking at quarterback, I think you go ahead and you play Caleb. Great matchup. I mean, he's pretty much every single week throughout his entire career at this point. And at the same time, we get a little bit of rushing upside. Obviously, Baker was a much better option before the Godwin and before the Evans injuries. But now you're looking at Baker with Shepard and McMillan versus Caleb with DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen. So I'll go ahead. I will play Caleb in a good spot against Washington. Going over to the flex, I think we're going to go ahead and play Chase Brown. Honestly, pretty easy spot for me as well. I think Chase Brown's probably in the best offense out of, the vast majority of these out of all these flex options. And at the same time, you now back-to-back weeks where he plays over 50% of the snaps. Looks like he is trending towards being the full-time guy here for the Bengals. So I think Chase Brown, kind of a very easy play, to be honest. Now, moving this over to Armonte says, I'm making the playoffs. Should I counter for Montgomery and Godwin? All players are on a contract year. I'm assuming this is a dynasty format, right? This is a dynasty league. Let me go ahead and grab this. Thinking through this realistically, can we be confident DeAndre Hopkins gives you anything in 2025? No. Can we be confident that we know what the role is for James Conner in 2025? No. Can we be confident that Deontay Johnson is anything in 2025? No. I would say Chris Godwin probably is the best shot out of anybody to make a 2025 impact. But Godwin will be coming back from a very serious injury that he suffered not at the beginning of the year, but at the same time, but during the middle of the season. With that being said, I do think that the best asset here from a rebuilding perspective is is James Conner. I apologize. And the best asset from a 2025 and beyond perspective is probably Chris Godwin. So I think that this does make sense to go ahead and make that pivot. Sorry, I didn't mean to click it on that screen. I think I would go Conner and Godwin. But for me, I'm not a big Deontay Johnson guy. Obviously, Deontay did have a nice little stretch of games here. Phoenix Lance coming out with the start sit. Always happy to see you, my guy. Let me hook you up with a free start sit question. That way, the next time you send it in, it is free. Happy BR, 0.2 point per carry. Bonuses for long plays, touchdown, 6-point passing touchdown. Let's make it 3 wins in a row. Really appreciate you. Looking forward to this. So here, I think in a 0.2 point per carry format, let me see the true gap that this brings between Caleb as well as Stroud. So just to get a baseline expectation here, Caleb Williams so far this season, we can show this on the live stream. I don't need to look at this in the other window. Caleb Williams so far this year, rushing the football. The attempts haven't really been there. Honestly, would be about the same as Stroud. So the point per carry aspect not going to be impacting what we have. I think almost the larger impact here with these quarterbacks that aren't going to run the ball will just be the fact that it's a 6-point passing touchdown league. So I think you just go with the guy you'd prefer. For me, I would prefer CJ Stroud. Going down to what we have at tight ends, I think you go Cade Otton now that you have no Evans as well as no Godwin. Honestly, I'm doing this regardless of what the underdog picks say, but I am legitimately just interested. Cade Otton, higher, lower, 43.5 yards. Kraft, higher, lower, 34.5. Yeah, so they have Cade Otton in a completely different tier than Kraft as well. Kraft, you're having to compete against Reed, Dobbs, Wicks, Christian Watson, where Cade Otton just doesn't have any close to that type of competition. I'm going over to wide receiver. Honestly, regardless of if Daniels plays or not, I probably go ahead and I probably take Terry McLaurin. It's a tough matchup, which sucks, but realistically speaking, it's very hard to know exactly what we should expect for Tank Dell. Jennings isn't going to play. Nico's not playing. McMillan, I would love to see what we have in a week. You know what? I'm willing to maybe be a little bit more flexible here, especially when we are starting Stroud. If you're in a spot where Daniels plays, I for sure go Scary Terry. You know what? I'm going to go Scary Terry regardless. It's just a little bit nerve-wracking. Not only the fact that you're going to have the worst quarterback play, but also at the same time that you're going to be dealing with the Chicago Bears matchup, which is something typically we want to be avoiding at wide receiver. But I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for sticking with us for years now, my guy. And like I said, I did hook you up with that free start sit question. So next time you send it my way, it should be free. Now, McCon coming out says current receivers are Adams, Neighbors. Running back, we have H.N. Hall. Flex being Dell. Bucky, looking to trade to upgrade. Bucky to Roshan, slight downgrade. Jameson to Jalen Waddle, massive upgrade. Waddle's the best player in this deal, and it's not even remotely close. I would literally be saying this regardless of if Jameson was suspended or not, but the fact that Jameson's suspended for 2 weeks just makes it an even better trade. So 100% you go after the Jalen Waddle side here. Not even remotely close. Now, Hot Daddy, always happy to see you, says, I have Tyreek, Jefferson, Hopkins, Pierce Alt, receiver. We also have Chase Brown on the bench. This is not close for me. Bucky Irving, and I know y'all probably have heard me give this analogy 1,000 times, but like when you're trading A.J. Brown for Saquon Barkley, you're trading a Ferrari for a Lamborghini. It's like, what do you prefer, right? They're both crazy expensive assets, both incredible in their own rights. But the last thing I'm doing when I'm trading a Ferrari for a Lamborghini is concerning myself with the little pair of fuzzy dice that hangs from the window shield. That's what Bucky Irving is in this deal. It's meaningless. It is such a small piece when you're moving off of massive assets like this. So for me, I'd rather have Saquon Barkley. I think running back production is a little bit harder to come by, especially if you have Tyreek, Jefferson. Obviously, we're absolutely loaded at wide receiver here. So I think you go ahead. I think you take Barkley. Now, Chubb Norris, happy to see you. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for taking advantage of that Underdog promo as well. Says, first time playing fantasy, and I'm not sure what I could do to make the team better. Much love, much love. Going to be excited to check this out. Team is a dub. So this is the number one team in the league analyzer, but I'm sorry. I think we are making a mistake when we pull in the rankings here. I think we are pulling them in as if this is a dynasty format, when in reality, it looks like it is most likely a keeper league. So the league analyzer and the rankings alongside the players' names, not super valid. So just kind of ignore those. But anyway, here, it's a league in which we can start 4 wide receivers weekly. So wide receiver depth maybe does matter just a bit, but at the same time, it's a 10-team format, so there should be some pretty quality options down there on the waiver wire. Going over to what we have specifically at quarterback, we are currently rolling with Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, and Bo Nix. Obviously, it looks like Jordan Love is a quarterback that you are starting every single week, regardless of matchup. I personally don't put him in the same tier as what you have with the Lamar Jackson, the Josh Allen, the Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts guys that are going to actually run the ball. But still at the same time, I mean, with Love, he could potentially lead the NFL in passing yards per game, passing touchdowns per game going into the future. Looking at Justin Herbert as well as Bo Nix. This is maybe making me think that this is actually a dynasty format and just a shallower dynasty league in general. If this is a 1 quarterback redraft league, go ahead and cut either Herbert or Nix. Just keep whatever player that you would rather have there at QB2, but we don't need to roster 3 guys. Obviously, if it's a dynasty format, we like the long-term outlook for these players. Not going to fault you at all for it. Going over to what we have at running back, we are currently sitting with the combo of Kenneth Walker. It doesn't matter if it's dynasty or redraft, RB1, and super pumped about it. Someone we're starting every week regardless. We have David Montgomery as a super solid low-end RB1 for this season, high-end RB2. We have Najee Harris as a decent depth play. We have Pacheco for the long-term upside. So for me, one thing that I would look to do here, specifically in a league in which you can start 4 wide receivers weekly, so the wide receiver depth does matter a decent bit. If possible, I think it'd be interesting to go ahead and see if you could potentially move off of Najee Harris and a wide receiver to go get a wide receiver upgrade. Like if you're able to potentially trade like Najee and Pickens to go get an absolute stud wide receiver. We talked about this in the video today about the playoff schedules, but Najee Harris actually has the worst playoff schedule of any running back in fantasy football. Plus, at the same time, you are seeing the regression with the usage with Jaylen Warren back in. So for me, I think, honestly, both Pittsburgh Steelers options are decent sell high candidates. Going over to what we have at receiver, you're currently sitting with Jefferson, Neighbors, both wide receiver ones, rest of season. Obviously, super pumped about these guys, 2025 and beyond as well. It's a league where wide receiver depth actually does matter. So my thing here is I don't hate you rostering this many receivers, specifically in this kind of format where you can't start 4 of them weekly. And it's not like we're super strong beyond our top 2 guys. I mean, obviously, you do have the suspension with Jameson, which actually may hurt this team a bit. I mean, the main thing that honestly would be way better than the Najee trade, would just be an absolute no-brainer if we can possibly pull it off, is seeing if you're able to move off of a tight end like Evan Ingram. Obviously, Evan Ingram, much more valuable than this in a redraft format. Like I said, this is right now pulling in the dynasty rankings. But nonetheless, if you can find a team that needs some help at tight ends, and if we could potentially send one of our tight ends and go get a viable wide receiver upgrade, I think it's a no-brainer. Because, I mean, ultimately, you are sitting not only with Jake Ferguson already through his bye, who is somebody that we can start every single week, regardless of the matchup going into the future, but also at the same time, we have T.J. Hawkinson coming in, who has a considerable amount of long-term upside here as well to continue to improve. So for me, I think it'd be really smart if we could potentially get out from Ingram, make that 2-for-1 deal, get that improvement inside the starting lineup. At wide receiver. And then with that open roster spot, we aren't going to be wanting to roster 3 tight ends. Instead, we'd opt to go ahead and pick up another running back off the waiver wire that you think is an injury away from making a difference. But overall, it's a team with a lot of value. It's just like almost the exact opposite advice that I would give most teams in this live stream. Specifically because it's a format in which the wide receiver depth actually does matter, and we don't have much of it. So I think I would actually look to trade a tight end, go try to get some wide receiver help, or go try to trade Najee and get a stud receiver. I mean, like I said, I think that there are multiple reasons to be worried about Najee. And to be honest with you, I drafted Najee in a decent amount of underdog drafts, so I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping that Najee continues to crush, but just trying to be realistic. But a myth, always happy to see it, says, get Nico back in 2 weeks. So I'm pushing at 4-3, likely securing Caleb off the waiver wire. Rate the trade as is. So Goff is just if you're telling me Caleb Williams is on the waiver wire, Goff doesn't really have much value. And mainly because it just tells me how our league mates are going to view the quarterback position, and that you can go with a week-to-week streamers that are pretty exciting. So looking at this, it's primarily going to be judged based off you going for Mike Evans. If you make the fantasy football playoffs, it looks like a great deal for that stretch of games at the very end. The hesitation with that, of course, is, well, Evans is missing this week, probably missing next week, probably missing week 10, and then he has the week 11 bye. So before the playoffs get here, Mike Evans will be missing more weeks than he'll actually be playing. Wide receiver, we also have Nico Collins injured. We have St. Brown, JSN as our wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. We have Saquon Chase Brown. If you can get this team to the playoffs, you win the deal. But obviously, if us trading away and downgrading at quarterback and giving a viable wide receiver depth piece like DeAndre Hopkins means we end up missing the playoffs, then it's going to be a disaster. Let's keep in mind, a lot of these players on your team as well, wide receiver, haven't gone through their bye. I mean, JSN still has to go through it. Nico Collins has to go through it. Mike Evans, who you're trading for, still has to go through it. So the wide receiver depth is going to be tough to come by. But, I mean, if you can get to the playoffs, I like it. Now, Bezecki coming out with a start-sit question here. Running back, we're going to go ahead and we're going to play Bigsby regardless of if ETN's good to go or not. Wide receiver, we are going to go ahead. We are going to be playing Tyler Lockett and Deebo Samuel, wishing we played Puka Nacua, but trust me, I would have benched him too. I'm going over to tight end. We're going to go Laporta. I mean, right now the Lions project to be the highest scoring offense in the league this week, according to sportsbooks. Whereas if you were looking at what you have specifically with the Pats. Sportsbooks are telling us that they should be a bottom 5 offense in the NFL. Going over to the flex options here, I think we go ahead and we play George Pickens. Jalen McMillan, I think, could eventually turn out to be the flex, depending on how strong he is. I do like the rookie profile. Obviously, you're going to get great quarterback play. You're going to get a pretty strong role in this offense as well. But it's difficult to go out there and play somebody like McMillan over Pickens right away before we even see the role, when you already know what you are going to get from Pickens. Now, Mav77 coming out with the trade says this is a 3 wide receiver, 2 flex format. We have 7 startable receivers, 6 and 1, and I'm looking to cash in for a running back. If this was a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format, it wouldn't even be remotely close. I'd be screaming that you stole them. In this format, it actually does make a lot of sense. I could see a team that really desperately needs an extra starter going out there and making this trade for the additional depth piece. But for us, 6 and 1, where we have this many startable options, if we can go get that elite level RB, that should be much better with Derek Carr coming back in. I think it is interesting. Now, Goose says Amari is a tough playoff schedule. If healthy, running back room's decent. Is this an upgrade at wide receiver? Okay. Amari to Waddle, clear upgrade. Najee to... Actually, let me rephrase that. No. Amari to Waddle, lateral move, up to you on who you prefer. Okay. But Najee to Olave, in my mind, is a clear upgrade. Najee has the worst fantasy playoff schedule of any running back. Najee also is seeing his receiving usage get eaten away from Jaylen Warren. So, yeah, I think we go with the Waddle and Olave side. Another side of this is Waddle's through the bye. So, yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead. I think we do take Waddle. Now, Bong's away coming out. This is a trade where we send Hunt and Chase for CMC and Adams. I think you're taking on too much risk. If you told me, Mason, I know for 100% certainty that McCaffrey will be back after the bye week, then yes, and McCaffrey will be who he was before, then of course, yes, you can go ahead and you can make this deal. But ultimately, it is very difficult to go out there and say that with 100% certainty. Hunt is a running back 2 for the time being. Devontae Adams is a wide receiver 2 for the time being. Obviously, if McCaffrey does come back and Pacheco comes back as well, the CMC Adams side could be winning this in the long run. I just think you're taking on too much risk in doing this, especially now with Higgins banged up. Now, Snub says, untrue to start at tight end in a flex. Picked up Laporta off the waiver wire. Thoughts on him without Jameson? So we talked about this previously, but the Jameson suspension doesn't really positively impact any of the pass catchers in Detroit, in my mind. Like 99% of the time a receiver goes out, you're more excited about the secondary options. Like I think Gesicki will be more interesting if T. Higgins doesn't play. But the reason for that is T. Higgins over the past month has averaged 10 targets a game. Do y'all know what Jameson Williams has averaged over his past 4 games played? He's averaged 2.5 targets. So we've said it 1,000 times, but I mean, this is why anytime he has a big spike week, we go through and we say, look to sell high on Jameson. Jameson Williams is a receiver that is going to give you some crazy high spikes, but at the same time, the floor is extremely low, not being able to consistently look at the target volume being there. He stretches NFL defenses, so he's great for the Lions offense, while at the same time not necessarily being great for fantasy. I think I would go Kincaid over Laporta, to be honest with you. I like picking up Laporta off the waiver wire if he's free. And with how many teams I drafted Laporta on, he's my most drafted tight end on Underdog. Taking him every chance I had in round 4. And I took him in round 4 of the Flock League as well. There's no tight end I'm rooting for more than Sam Laporta. But at this point, I think I can say like, oh, great waiver wire pickup. Somebody drops him. But in terms of us going through and starting him and trying to make some bullish argument because you have no Jameson, it would definitely be a stretch. And then going over to what we have in the flex, I think you just keep it simple. You play Jalen Waddle now that you get Tua back in. Obviously, it's a tough look at it initially in that Waddle has not had a single game with double-digit fantasy points since week 1. But also, Tua has not played a full game since week 1 either. So I think we can go back to 2023, 2022, and look at the larger samples with Waddle, where the man absolutely crushes. Now, Big Man Beto coming out says, got offered this recently, thinking of asking for Swift instead of Brown. St. Brown to Jefferson, up to you. CMC to Chase Brown and Pacheco, I'm not doing it. I am honestly more confident in McCaffrey coming back than I would be in a timely manner for the fantasy football season than I would be for Pacheco, because the Chiefs are undefeated right now. The Chiefs don't really have an incentive to rush Pacheco back in. They don't necessarily need to. I think you could possibly see a situation in which the Chiefs come out and they potentially get Pacheco, 100%. Don't bring him back until week 15. Ramp him up at the very end of the regular season for the fantasy football playoff stretch. I think McCaffrey is higher ceiling than Pacheco. Chase Brown, not remotely close either. So honestly, this is the price point where I think I'd prefer McCaffrey. Now, I do want to reiterate as well how I'm viewing this is I think St. Brown and Jameson are about the same. So, I'm sorry, St. Brown and Justin Jefferson. Obviously, St. Brown and Jameson aren't. But if you have like some massive gap in your own values where you think Jefferson is significantly better than Amon-Ra St. Brown, then at that point, I think you could justify it a lot more easily. Now, moving this over to our next question. This is a team review coming out from Prowls. Appreciate you. I'm going to be excited to dive into this. This Hey Mason currently 3-4. Tons of waiver wire options to replace Anthony Richardson. I'm leaning Caleb Williams 100%. I would go through and I'd pick up Caleb Williams at a heartbeat. Also thinking we could flip some of the bench depth for a tight end or another stud to make a run. Thanks. Thank you. Team name here is Frumpy Pigskin. We are 5th in the league analyzer. This is a 8-team format where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So here, this is the best example that you will ever see of a league in which the wide receiver depth doesn't matter. We are always looking to sell a receiver and a depth piece to go get an upgrade elsewhere 100% of the time. Especially if you can get to yourself an elite level quarterback or an elite level tight ends, because in an 8-team league, everybody is going to be extremely strong at running back, extremely strong at wide receiver. The few ways that we can make our team stand out is by having that top end quarterback, by having that top end tight end. Looking at quarterback, we already dropped Anthony Richardson for Caleb Williams, it looks like. Yeah, Caleb would have been my favorite quarterback off the waiver wire as well. I think that makes a ton of sense. Going over to running back, we are currently sitting with the combo of Bijan Taylor. So, 12-team leagues, both easily running back ones. 8-team format, more like low-end RB1, maybe high-end RB2, HN in an 8-team league, mid RB2. It would be an absolute no-brainer if you could find a team that needs the Chuba Hubbard production at running back, where obviously there's no way in hell we are ever starting Chuba Hubbard ourselves. And if you could sell Chuba Hubbard and Kyler Murray to pivot over and get to Lamar, get to Allen, get to Hurts, get to Daniels, I'd absolutely love to make that move. Much easier said than done, of course. And then same thing going over to tight end. If you could possibly package together either Mark Andrews or Tucker Kraft with Chuba Hubbard or Rachaad White, doesn't remotely matter, just one of the depth running back pieces, and get us to Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, George Kittle, also would be an absolute no-brainer if possible. But again, much easier said than done. Going over to receiver, we have St. Brown, so locked and loaded wide receiver 1, Brian Thomas, probably low end wide receiver 2 in an 8-team league in particular. We have DK Metcalf, who's going to be missing a few, missing this week, possibly a few. We have Higgins, who's possibly going to be missing this week, but ultimately the wide receiver depth doesn't matter much because it's a league where we're going to have to start 2 receivers in a flex. Going over to tight ends, I actually think that there are some adjustments that we would make right now. I think that you have better options on the waiver wire than who we're currently holding. I think I would drop Mark Andrews and pick up Cade Otton now that you're in a spot in which you have the injuries to both Evans and Godwin, which should expand the target share that you have from Otton in this offense. I know Andrews has looked good over the past 2 weeks, but in the reality is you just kind of had the lucky touch. I don't want to say lucky touchdowns, but you've had the unsustainable touchdown rate. Right now, Andrews is going through and the man is giving you 3 touchdowns off of 5 targets. It's very difficult to expect that to continue going into the future. There's actually some volume underneath for Cade Otton in this offense, which I'd be more comfortable projecting out. So, if you could go through and if you could, 1, cut Andrews, pick up Otton. I already like that we made the AR to Caleb play. And 2, see if we can trade one of the depth running backs and go get that elite tight end. See if we can trade one of the depth running backs. See if we can go get that elite quarterback upgrade. Or honestly, the same thing with the depth receiver like T. Higgins or DK Metcalf. I think that would be the number 1 play, specifically in an 8-team league in which you only start 2 wide receivers in a flex. But thank you again, my guy. I really do appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way with this. Now, moving this over to That Morris Kid, always happy to see us. Says, what's up, Mason? Made this trade earlier today. Thoughts, keep grinding, love the content. Really do appreciate you. And this is an insane deal. Legitimately insane. I have no idea who the hell made this with you. Even if Pacheco does not come back this season, I still probably prefer the Tyreek Hill side. But given the fact that there is the chance you see Pacheco return to this offense later in the year, and if we get to the fantasy football playoffs and you effectively swap Jaden Reed for Tyreek Hill, insane, love it. Obviously, we're really hoping Tyreek's not injured, but everything that I've read sounds like Tyreek will be good to go. Now, Joseph Natalie coming out with our next question. Hey, Mason, thanks for the help. I'm new to fantasy, and this really helped me a lot. Not sure who to start. Really appreciate you. Going to be excited to check this out. Burrow must start quarterback every single week, regardless of matchup. Tight end, we're going to go ahead. We're going to play Laporta. You have no Hawk, obviously. Running back, we're going to go with HN now that Tua is back in. I'm going to be going with probably Chase Brown here over Pollard, even with Pollard having the guaranteed touches. Here at wide receiver, Chase must start option every single week. Brian Thomas will be as well. And going down to the flex, this is where things become a little bit interesting. If we would have had no Bucky Irving in this Tampa game, I think I would have been very excited to go through and start Rachaad White aggressively. But it seems like Bucky's going to be good to go now. So at that point, I think we actually probably pivot off and we actually go with Tony Pollard. I hate the matchup that Pollard's in, but at the very minimum with Pollard, you do have a really nice role with no Spears where you should have every single target out of the backfield. Not only should he have every single target, but at the same time, we have seen him get to 20 plus carries. So hate the matchup, hate the offense, but the raw opportunity is there. So I think he's a decent second flex play, but I really appreciate you and really am wishing you the best of luck for this week. But let me refresh this to get some of the new questions in. And I do want to remind you, of course, if you wanted to ask any questions, you can hit that link in the live chat that says ask a question here, or you can go over to flockfantasy.com at the expert advice button in the top right corner. There you can ask a super message, a start sit question, a trade question, or a team review, whatever you are wanting. If you wanted a team review, I would highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have on Underdog Fantasy, because if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting that free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard. And you're going to be getting a free Dak Prescott pick as well. That would be a new offer for the Dak Prescott one, but the Malik Neighbors one should be there for everybody who has ever used code FLOCK on Underdog. So make sure you take advantage of that. And if you wanted the free team review over there on flockfantasy.com as well, just make sure you set up an account with the same email address on both sites so I can hook you up with that free team review voucher. And you can find that link in the live chat too. But let's move this over to our next question. This one coming out from DHD says, currently third, 4-3, concerned about Kamara's injuries, but I do have a couple other studs at running back piece. Appreciate you, my guy. Here looking at running back, we're going from Montgomery to Kamara. How I read the report is it was saying that Kamara has been playing through this. So it's not necessarily something that's going to be a dramatically different situation than what you have been looking at. So going from Montgomery to Kamara, particularly in a full PPR format, in my mind, I do view that as a clear upgrade. JSN to McMillan, I view that as a clear downgrade, but who knows? McMillan could be comparable. I think it's a fair trade. If it was a non-PPR or half PPR league, I'd make a strong argument for the Montgomery side, but in a full PPR format where the Kamara usage is still there, while at the same time you're going to get Derek Carr back in soon, I'd probably go Kamara. Vincent coming out says, may have to start two of these guys depending on Higgins' injury status. Thanks, Mason. Thank you. Looking at this here for the flex, I think plan A right now is probably to go ahead. And actually, now that Deebo Samuel's good to go, we're going to go Ladd McConkey in the flex. And then if T. Higgins is ruled out, it's either going to be between Pearsall or Christian Kirk. Like I said, if it was no Deebo, it'd be very easy to go ahead and be very easy to take Pearsall. But the expectation is that Deebo Samuel is going to be playing here. So, I don't know. I think backup, I hate to say it, I probably take it safe with Kirk and see what the role looks like for Sticky Ricky. I'm hoping Sticky Ricky crushes it. Okay. But let's move this over. This is a 2 wide receiver, 4 flex, Superflex Dynasty format. Other receivers are Zay, Higgins, Smith, Addison. Other quarterbacks are May and Love. So May in the future first versus CJ Stroud. I think you can make a strong argument for either one, Waddle and Jameson versus Christian Watson. Give me the Waddle side easily. So honestly, with how Drake May looks to be trending right now, I think I would actually just prefer the Drake May side. If you were trying to come up with a counter, if you got to keep the first rounder, then at that point, it's very easily, I don't want to say easily, but it's definitely going to be CJ Stroud for me. But if you're trading away the first round rookie pick as well, then in that case, I think we go with the May side. Now, Parrish coming out with this start set. Here for the flex, we're looking at Chuba, Rome, Pearsall, Keenan, Wicks, Leggett, and Tolbert. I think Chuba Hubbard definitely going to be the must-start name here. Obviously, it sucks that Bryce Young's back in. This should be an absolute garbage offense. But, I mean, with that being said, you're still in a situation in which no Jonathan Brooks, so you are going to just get every single touch out of this backfield. And that kind of floor is going to give you some consistency here. Now, G-Salt, always happy to see you. Let me go ahead and hook you up with a free start-sit question. My guy says, best fantasy football content out there. Not sure what to do this weekend with Kittle, Bucky, and Pickens. Traded for Brian Robinson. Will start him. Didn't start Puka. Okay. I hate we traded away Kittle. I hope we have a strong tight end here. If you're telling me we traded away Kittle, then obviously we go crap. Let me reread this. Kittle, Bucky, Pickens traded for Brian Robinson. I wish we kept Kittle, to be honest with you. But here at running back, you go ahead and you play Brian Robinson. Hopefully B-Rob in your mind instead is Bijan. If we got Bijan, I'd be very excited about it. But regardless, whatever running back we got in return, we play over Bucky. And then down here in the flex spot, we also traded away Pickens. We didn't start Puka. Here's what we're doing. We're rolling those dice. We're getting them nice and hot. You're going to blow in them, go throw them out there and see what we can get from Keon. I think Raheem Mostert is an interesting look. I think you could definitely go Mostert here. With this being a full PPR format, though, people saying he didn't trade Kittle. Where are y'all seeing that? Because I read this at the top. Not sure what to do this weekend with Kittle, Bucky, and Pickens traded for B-Rob. In parentheses, will start him. So, no idea where y'all reading that from. From my eyes, I'm reading that Kittle's not on this team anymore. And I think you go Keon. Obviously, if we have Pickens, we play Pickens here. Keon, good week last week, but honestly, I'm a little bit concerned that you're going to see Amari continue to expand. Yeah. I can't. Obviously, if Kittle plays, you play Kittle over. I'm sorry. If you have Kittle, you play him over Kraft. I don't think he needs help with that regardless. But from how I'm reading it, all three of those guys got it up. Okay, Jax is the only traded the other two. Okay, so Kittle injury and Sunday Night Football. So obviously we're going to see if we have any news tomorrow morning. Let me see what time Kraft does play. In terms of this, I'm assuming it will be a 1 p.m. Eastern game for the Packers. Yes, it is. It's in Jacksonville. So honestly, if we don't get any news about Kittle, I wouldn't fault you at all for just going ahead and going with Kraft. Unless you could potentially just swap off Goddard and pick up like Frymuth for Monday nights. As obviously if Frymuth would be available Monday night, I think that would be a clear play. And then I actually do really like the B-Rob trade if Kittle was not involved. So B-Rob trade's great. If you don't have a backup option to pivot to and we don't hear anything about Kittle before we get to the main slate, I do think you just go ahead and you play Tucker Kraft. Unless you can pick up Frymuth as a backup. Now, Preston coming out with our next question. Here, this is Purdy versus Caleb. I'd go Caleb over Purdy with Kittle, Debo, both banged up. No Jennings, no Ayuk. Going over running back, Jordan Mason must start guy every week till McCaffrey is back in. We did not play Cup, so I guess we have to go with Devonta Smith. The tight end, we're going to go with Pitts. And then down in the flex spot, we're going to go with Chase Brown. If you have no ETN, you could pivot from Chase Brown to Tank Bigsby. If you had no ETN, you could pivot to Bigsby. But with ETN playing, with this being a PPR league, you definitely need Brown. Now, C-Dung coming out with a massive dono for a trade question. Let me hook you up with a free trade question. That way, next time you send one in, it's on the house, my guys. So, traded Ford and London week 1. Traded Wilson, Reed, Laporta for Hill and Kelsey last week. Traded Keon for Brooks. Want to add another elite RB. How? You have robbed your league thus far. And you are about to, if this is on the table for you, this will be yet again another robbery. We're on the roster. We will have Tyreek Hill, Drake London, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle at receiver. Running back will have Kenneth Walker, Jahmyr Gibbs, tight end Travis Kelce. You have a juggernaut roster. Juggernaut teams can afford to go out there and pay up for the elite level studs, which Jahmyr Gibbs is. We go and we get Gibbs here. Love it. And like I said, I hooked you up with another free trade question, just in case you had anything else you want to send my way. Moving this over to our next one, this is going to be Hopkins versus Harrison. I go Harrison over Hopkins relatively easily with the worry that you may end up only getting 30% of the snaps played for Hopkins this week. We just simply have no idea what to expect. Obviously, we can reevaluate after this Raiders game, and we can potentially pivot over to Hopkins starting next week. But I know Harrison's going to be out there running every route. I know Harrison's going to be playing every snap. Where right now it's just extremely difficult to project that out with DeAndre Hopkins in particular. Okay. Now let's move this over to our next question. Next one coming out from Tsukiyomi. I believe we were saying that correctly. Team name 0.01. It's one of those free Underdog team reviews. Appreciate you taking advantage of the offer, my guy. Going to be excited to check this out. Saying, trying to prepare for the playoffs. I'm new to football in general, and this is my second year doing fantasy. Do you recommend going for any trades to make my team better, or should I leave it as is? Not exactly sure what we should target rest of the season. Thank you. Much love. And I am very sorry. I appreciate you taking advantage of the free Underdog offer, but I can already tell before we even look at your team that there is going to be nothing that I can possibly say here. If you go through and you look at this in the league analyzer, we are not just the number one team. We are the number one team by a wide margin. Where right now, we are sitting with approximately 26,000 points. The next highest team's at 17,000. Which obviously these points are kind of arbitrary, but you can see that, we have 40% more value on our roster than any other team. We have an insane roster. We are 7-0 as well. So, I mean, that just goes through and it shows yet again. I mean, we almost have 3 times the value of the team at the bottom here. Pulling this up, it's a league where you can start 4 receivers weekly, so wide receiver depth matters a little bit more. Right now, at running back, we have 4 running back ones rest of season. We have Kyron, Bijan, Mixon, Achane. Going over to receiver, we have Lamb, Diggs, Moore, Flowers, Deontay, Hopkins, Jennings, Bateman. I can tell you the first thing that I do with this team is I send Rashad Bateman off into the moon. There is legitimately no way that you ever play Rashad Bateman with how good this roster is here. Even if Flowers misses, could you ever put Bateman in your line? 0% chance. 0% chance you could get him in. So you cut Bateman. You pick up a player that presumably could get into your starting lineup, like Zach Charbonnet. Kenneth Walker goes down. Charbonnet all of a sudden is an RB1. Honestly, you still probably don't play him because the team's this loaded, but still, you maybe get a bunch of value for him in trade. Really, the only thing I can tell you is when you're this loaded at every position, there's no excuse not to have a true elite level quarterback. Like, can we find a team with a strong QB that possibly needs some help at receiver? This team, they only have 3 options. I mean, if we could send them like Burrow and Deontay Johnson, or Burrow and Hopkins, or Burrow and Flowers to go get to Jaden Daniels, a quarterback with some rushing upside, I think that would be interesting. This team has Lamar. I mean, past Olave, Dobbs, their wide receiver 4. If you wanted to see if we could send them the combo Stephon Diggs and Burrow to go get to Lamar, that'd be an absolute no-brainer for us. I mean, Burrow could potentially lead the NFL in passing yards and passing touchdowns. And the issue is, in a 4-point passing touchdown league, just Burrow is simply not going to be able to compete with the quarterbacks like Lamar and Daniels, who are going to add on 80 rushing yards in a couple games. So clearly this is an insane roster. I wish I could have a bunch of nuanced takes and a bunch of really interesting things to say. But the reality is, I think you're in a spot, you're just cruising to the fantasy football championship. And if you were going to do anything, you trade for one of the quarterbacks that could get there with the rushing upside as well, just simply because you're so damn strong with this team, you can afford it. But thank you again for taking advantage of the Underdog promo. I wish I could have more to help you out with, but I mean, it's just, I have no idea how you'd even submit your starting lineup. Now, Jay Garza's coming out with another free team review. Says, I started off 0-4, and I made several trades to get me a legitimate roster. We're currently 2-5 now, and by the way, it's going to be 3-5 after this week. Do you think I should upgrade any parts of my team? I have a decent shot to end 9-5 or 8-6 with my upcoming schedule. Thanks for all you do. Really appreciate you. Okay. I am very happy that we've been able to go from 0-4 to 2-5. But realistically speaking, to go to 2-5 and then say that we are going to be able to end at 9-5, you are crazy. A 2-5 roster, no matter how strong it may be, we are sitting at number 1 in the live stream. I'm sorry, in the league analyzer. We should be in a pretty good spot. It doesn't matter. We're not thinking about the fantasy football playoffs. We're not thinking about winning the next 7 weeks without dropping another. You are still in a hole, and you are still needing to I don't know. This is the number 1 team in the league analyzer, but we need to be focusing on how we win games right now, not long term. Starting off at quarterback, we are effectively streaming. We are currently sitting here with Sam Darnold. Other quarterbacks on the waiver wire like Stafford, Anthony Richardson, Drake May. To be honest with you, I wouldn't mind going through and rostering a second quarterback just so we can go ahead and play the matchups between that quarterback and Darnold. I think if we're looking at some of the bottom end options that we have on this roster, it's not like we have, phenomenal players here that you just can't afford to get rid of. Like going through and say, looking at an option like Khalil Shakir, now that you have Amari in Buffalo, I don't see a path in which Shakir hits your lineup. So, if you wanted to drop Shakir, go pick up Anthony Richardson, just see if we get a game with a rushing spike. I think that could be interesting. Going over to running back, you're currently sitting with Kyron Williams, top 10 RB rest of season. Kenneth Walker, top 10 RB rest of season. Beyond this, running back depth is extremely shaky. You have some of the handcuffs down there on the bench, guys like Braylon Allen, Jalen Warren. But it's not like these are players that we could look at if we needed a fill-in just any given week. No, in reality, they're more so, okay, they have elite ceilings if the injury were to occur in front of them, but nobody that you can really think about just playing off the whim. And for me personally, I would rather have Braylon Allen over Dalvin Cook. I understand, obviously, Breece Hall is much better than Rico Dowdle, but if we are thinking about the top-end range of outcomes here, if you were to get an injury, say, to Brees Hall, Braylon Allen immediately becomes an RB1. Whereas realistically speaking, the Rigo Dowdle goes down. What does Dalvin Cook become? A borderline flex play? So I would potentially look to pivot there. Going over to receiver, we have a couple top end options. We have Chase, we have Lamb, we have Waddle, an extremely strong flex play. I need to move down to Jennings in our rest of season ranks. When we set him at wide receiver 42, I was assuming that Jennings was gonna be healthy and not missing more time. But let's move Jennings down because I definitely would prefer Pittman over Jennings at this point. I'd rather have McMillan. I'd rather have Pearsall. I think we move Jennings down to 45. But nonetheless, wide receiver depth, we don't have a ton of it. We have the elite tight end in Bowers. I think your team's exactly how I'd want to have it set up. It's a roster in which you only start 2 receivers in a flex. We've optimized for the studs at the top. We don't necessarily have a ton of depth underneath. Obviously, this is going to make it where the waiver wire moves that we make are probably the most important things that we can do on this roster. For me, I would prefer to potentially go through and look at a couple of these players that I view as higher ceiling options, such as Braylon Allen over Dalvin Cook, such as even Christian Kirk over Shakir. Maybe going with a quarterback like Anthony Richardson over Shakir. Just seeing what happens when we're effectively just streaming quarterbacks right now as is. But I really appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way with this. And yeah, thank you so much for taking advantage of the Underdog promo. Congrats on having a strong team. But again, if you're 2-5, you can't be thinking about, oh, I'm going to end up 9-5 or 8-6. No, you need to think about, how do I win this week? That's the main thing. Now, let's move this over from Just Sherman. Who's in here says, actually on break for my team live in a second. It's by far my worst team, and we're about to see how bad it is. We're rolling out Anthony Richardson at quarterback. Running back, oh, dear God. You got to play Tracy? Obviously, Tracy has the workload, but Tracy has a garbage offense, garbage matchup. Going over to receiver, we have Tyreek to play. Deebo Samuel's going to be good to go, which is a saving grace. We go Kraft over Andrews. And then in the flex, I'm assuming we just go ahead and we play Christian Kirk. Be a little... I think it's a fine team. I wish we had a better running back too. I wish we had a better flex option. But when we're sitting here with Deebo and Tyreek, you could see a spike from either guy any given week. It's going to be very awkward when Deebo's on bye next week. That's going to put us in a very, very tough spot. But 1-6, if my guy, if you had that bad of a record, you should have traded away Tyreek. Yeah, if you're sitting at 1-3, we couldn't have waited this long to get Tua back in for Tyreek. You couldn't have afforded it. But hopefully we can really win out from here. But the reality is, of course, this is a team that I think any given week could have that massive spike given the wide receivers that we have. But at the same time, it's definitely, in my mind, not a strong enough roster without stance unless Tracy and the Giants offense really surprised to the upside to come through and dramatically change. But let's move this over to our next question. So trade coming out from Etraj says, should I take this trade or someone else offered me Puka for Taylor? I'd rather have Taylor. and what trade ups my team overall. Taylor to Bijan, slight upgrade. Sutton to Ramondre to Algier, slight downgrade. I'd be more excited about this than just getting Puka. Like, the thing is, Sutton's an absolute zero, right? It's like, literally, I'd rather have a waiver wire option than Sutton at this point. So we're effectively just going through and trading away, say, the combo of Jonathan Taylor and Stevenson for Bijan and Algier. None of these players are through their bye week yet. Kind of depends on the running back depth that you have. We have Gibbs, Jordan Mason, so we don't have a ton of RB depth. So with this in particular, I probably prefer the Taylor side because I actually think that you may be in a spot in which you actually have to start Ramondre later in the season. Like, if you were loaded, I think you could go out there and you could just get the best player, which the best player in this is Bijan Robinson. But hope I was able to help out. And I think it's an interesting trade. I think it's a fair trade. But LT coming out says, who do we put at RB2 and who do we flex? Basically, Chase versus Brian Robinson and Garrett versus Waddle. I think we go with Brian Robinson. Robinson's been an absolute crusher. He has another week to get healthier. There's an outside chance Jaden Daniels actually plays this game. The flex, Garrett Wilson's the guy to go with. I've been looking at sports books. I'm actually surprised to see how high they are on this Jets offense this week. Also, maybe a say no Lazard has a slight impact. Where maybe no Lazard makes it a little bit more exciting to play Wilson. Now, Brady Nelson coming out. This is a trade where we're sending Chase, so the best player, Brooks and Pearsall to get Jonathan Taylor and Achane. Ricky Pearsall to Juwan Jennings, slight downgrade, but it's honestly just kind of up to you. It really, that's not going to matter at all in this trade. It's Jamar Chase, Jonathan Brooks versus Jonathan Taylor and Devon Achane. Going through and looking at how desperate we potentially are for a running back. We have Barkley, Kenneth Walker, Jordan Mason. And McCaffrey. You don't need running back help. Wide receiver, we have St. Brown, Cup, London. So this seems so insane that I just kind of want the best player. I definitely think there's more value on the Jonathan Taylor and Devon Achane side. There's more value on the Taylor and Achane side of this. But specifically for your roster, I don't exactly see what this accomplishes. Where you already have so many players that you are able to go through and you're able to start every single week, that the last thing that you need is to be picking up an extra starter. So I think there's definitely more value on the Taylor Achane side, but I just don't see what it accomplishes for like a juggernaut team like yours. Now, Jackson coming out says, Etienne versus Olave. Oh, this is going to be Olave. What do you think? My running backs are Saquon, Tracy, and Dowdle. I don't think you have great running backs, but I think you have to go with Olave over Etienne. Because presumably, I don't see how like Etienne turns back into a player that you can comfortably put inside your starting lineup. But I see that very clear path with Olave, where, I mean, all of a sudden, if you were to get Derek Carr back in, and you have no Shaheed, Olave goes right back to being a must-start option every single week. So I think this is the Olave side. Skitty coming out with the trade. This is Love, Kincaid versus Hurts and Laporta. Oh, this is going to be the Hurts and Laporta side. Kincaid to Laporta, slight downgrade. I mean, obviously, you can make a strong argument that you're actually going to have more passing yards, more passing touchdowns from Jordan Love than Jalen Hurts. It's not even going to be remotely close. But operating under the assumption that this is a 4-point passing touchdown league, rushing production, just the absolute cheat code there at quarterback. Where in that case, Love just simply doesn't run the ball at all. I mean, you saw this past week, Jalen Hurts get there with multiple rushing touchdowns. So I think you go through and you take the best player in the deal, which in my mind is Jalen Hurts. Now, I duck them coming out with our next question. Here, running back, we're choosing between Brian Robinson, Kareem Hunt. Very, very close. I think you can go Kareem Hunt this week. I'm going to be going with Brian Robinson most weeks, but obviously the matchup against the Raiders is about the best you can ask for. Going over to receiver, we're going to go ahead. We're going to take Waddle. Tight end, we are going to have Pitts over Crab. Pitts has been pretty damn consistent as of late. And then going down to the flex, we're just going to go right back to Brian Robinson. Definitely really like both running backs this week, and would love to start both if we could, which obviously we can. Now, 18 coming out with a start sits is trying to pick if Higgins is out. Thank you for the help. Thank you. Here for the flex, obviously if T. Higgins plays, we go with T. Higgins. If T. Higgins if T. Higgins misses and Travis Etienne plays, then I would go with Tank Dell. If T. Higgins misses, but Travis Etienne misses as well, then at that point, I think you have to pivot over to Tank Bigsby. Plan A is Higgins, but obviously talked about the backup options as well. Now, Miller Royd, always happy to see you. Massive trade here where we are sending Adams to Metcalf, slight downgrade. Hunt, Jennings, Freiermuth to Bowers is such a massive upgrade. Nothing else here matters. Bowers is by far and away the best player in the deal. Jennings, guy you picked up off the waiver wire this week, that's currently injured, has the bye week in week 11. Freiermuth, waiver wire tied in effectively. Hunt could be a 0 3 weeks from now if we get Pacheco back in. We just don't know. So yeah, definitely want to go ahead and take the Bowers side. Not too close either. Now, Chase Wins coming out with a big-time donor for a team review says, just want to get a general view and if you think we should target some people. Really appreciate you. I'm going to be excited to check this out, my guy. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question as well. This is Osama bin Madden, second team in the league analyzer. We are currently in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, 12-team format, so options on the waiver wire may not necessarily be great, but at the same time, the wide receiver depth won't be super, super important. Looking at what we have at quarterback, we are effectively streaming. We have Caleb. I mean, I definitely think you could make an argument that Caleb is turning into a must-start guy every week, but rushing upside, not exactly there just yet. Definitely trending in the right direction. I think it's hard to call him like a Love, Burrow type passer, though, and he's not going to give you the same rush production that you're getting from guys like Daniels, Lamar, obviously. Now, going over to what we have with the waiver wire, you have guys like Cousins, Stafford, AR, Drake May. So definitely could go through and definitely could stream if need be. Looking at running back, we have Gibbs as a very comfortable RB1 here rest of season. We have a couple guys that give us the short-term production, but maybe long-term it's going to be hard to project out. Guys like Kareem Hunt and Jordan Mason, where say Pacheco comes back, CMC comes back, they're an absolute 0. It just takes a ton of the value away from this roster. We're 4-3, so it's not like we can only be thinking about the fantasy football playoffs. Obviously, it's a spot in which you do need to have a well-balanced team in general. wide receiver, A.J. Brown, Drake London, Puka Nacua. All top 10 options rest of season. Here's what I would do for sure. I think you need to go and trade and get off some of the short-term running back value and get an actual cornerstone asset in here at RB. I think it should be easy for you to do as well. I mean, you have Jaden Reed. Here's your wide receiver 5. If this was a league in which you can start 4 or 5 receivers weekly, then obviously we're chilling, not needing to do anything. But the issue that you have with this is that's not the scenario. This is a league where you can only start 2 receivers in a flex. So I think you want to go through and you want to see if we can attack one of these other rosters that maybe needs some help at wide receiver. Like this team is Ladd McConkey as their second option. You go offer them Jaden Reed. They're also 2 and 5. You offer them Jaden Reed and Jordan Mason for McCaffrey. How do they say no? Which honestly, I think we'd be probably overpaying at that point, but still at the same time, you could make an argument that it helps our team knowing that we have the short-term running back production anyway. We don't even need to start Jordan Mason. You can go out there and plug in Gibbs and Hunt. Who cares? We're not starting Jaden Reed. And if in the long term, for when Hunt's no longer viable, we have McCaffrey to play instead of Jordan Mason, I think a move like that could actually help our roster. I mean, going through and looking at some other potential trades that we could try to find with bad wide receiver teams, this team freaking has Wan'Dale Robinson as their wide receiver 1. How is this team this bad? This may be the worst team I've ever seen in terms of like a construction and strategy perspective. Like, what are they doing? I think we don't even go after the running back position with this team. Go send this team Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams for Jalen Hurts. And go get yourself an elite level quarterback from here. That's what we're doing. We're window shopping. Also, another thing is a 2-for-1 deal would be super advantageous in that you have Rome Odunze on the waiver wire. I mean, Rome should not be someone that's on waivers. I 100% would look to pick him up if we could. The issue is we don't have anybody on our roster that's good enough to bad enough to just go out there and cut. So it's like very tough for me to say, oh, let's go cut TJ Hawkinson and let's pick up Rome. I can't say that. Going over to tight end, we have Laporta as well as Hawk. So tight end, we're fine. I mean, we have someone we can play right now, and we also have long-term upside as well. So kind of chilling here. Fundamentally, a couple different moves that we can make. They all hinge about selling a wide receiver, right? We go through and we look to sell off a receiver like Jaden Reed, and we go get Jalen Hurts. We look to sell a receiver like Jaden Reed and one of the short-term running backs, and we go get McCaffrey. Looking at those other teams, I think it makes a ton of sense for them. We have plenty of wide receiver production. Can kind of see what we need here clearly as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we could say with this team. I mean, if you can make that 2-for-1 deal where we could say we can sell Caleb and Reed and go get Jalen Hurts, go pick up Rome Odunze immediately. Don't even bother bringing Adam Thielen off the IR. I mean, if he comes back on, you have nobody you can cut to actually put him on your active roster. So, I mean, you just go ahead and you'd cut him anyway. It doesn't really matter. Trying to think what else you could do. But yeah, I think it all hinges about selling a receiver. We either go get an elite quarterback, we go get some future production at running back. You'd also do a 2-for-1 tier up at running back. I mean, if possible, I just think it'd be a little bit tougher where we go through and we look to sell maybe the combo of both Najee Harris and Kareem Hunt, or Nick Chubb and Jordan Mason, to pivot over to that running back that we're a little bit more excited about with the long-term upside. So I think you have a bunch of different options. That's all what I'd start with, but I really appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way with this. And again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock. And I did hook you up with that free start sit question and that free trade question as well. So if you have any additional things you want to send my way for this team, please don't hesitate. Now, Runester coming out says, don't know if I should trust Debo. I trust Debo. Do you have like phenomenal options we can pivot to instead? Our best option at running back would be Etienne. Our best option at receiver would be Harrison. I mean, if you really wanted to go Harrison, you could, but for me, Debo, decent matchup, no Ayuk, good offense. Like, I think I can go ahead and play him. Yeah, Harrison would be your backup. If you didn't trust Harrison, I mean, you even trust Debo, you go Harrison. MJ says 6-1, Ayuk gone, Evans hurt, Etienne trash, need a flex. Garrett Wilson to DK Metcalf, downgrade. Kenneth Walker to CMC, downgrade. We get George Pickens for our troubles. I don't do it. I think if you told me, Mason, I can give you 100% certainty that yes, McCaffrey is going to be good to go. Yes, McCaffrey is going to be back playing, 90+% of the snaps in San Francisco, how we're used to, then sure, go for it. But I think that you are taking a big roll of the dice here if you make this trade. So I would rather have Walker myself. Now, Cruz coming out with a trade question. 2 and 5, my running backs are Etienne, White, and Pollard. Then we definitely want Rico Dowdle. Obviously, with Dowdle, I could assume that maybe you're in a spot in which I don't know. Dalvin Cook does see some work. Dalvin Cook does eat into the true upside that Dowdle has, but there's not a single running back I see on your roster that I go, oh my gosh, I am freaking pumped to start him over the next 2 months. I think you just play it safe with Dowdle. I mean, now Ivan coming out with our next question. Here at tight end, you're going to go ahead, you're going to play Ferguson. I know Henry's been much better with Drake May under center, but sportsbooks currently are projecting us to see a pretty big step backwards with May. Looking at the flex, if you were to have no Debo, it's Ricky Pearsall pretty easily. If Debo plays, I'm going to roll the dice with Jalen McMillan. Obviously, both these players are pretty damn exciting in terms of the upside of what they could be. We don't necessarily have a guarantee on either of them what they will be. But yeah, I think plan A is Pearsall if Debo misses. And if Debo plays, you pivot over to McMillan, which right now it looks like Debo's playing. Now, Heroxic says, daily listener, viewer, thanks for all the work. Really appreciate you, my friend. Let me go ahead and look this. Oh my gosh. We actually had this question at the beginning of the stream, which was very difficult. Essentially, the only two guys that I would look at here myself would be Jalen Waddle and Tony Pollard. In the flex, I think you go with Pollard, especially if you have a team that is this strong here. I mean, you have an absolute monstrous squad. I think you can make an argument that Waddle has a higher ceiling because obviously Pollard, you're in a really tough situation in terms of, one, it's a garbage offense. Two, it's a really, really tough matchup here as well. But I don't know. I'm trying to think about this. Dolphins should be a top 10 offense. Titans should be a bottom 5 offense. But if Tyreek's going to go, Waddle's going to see that. I think you go Pollard over Waddle. I mean, even going through, looking at the underdog picks, we did this earlier as well, but they just have Pollard so much higher than they have Waddle. Like Pollard right now is higher, lower, 85.5 total yards. Waddle is higher, lower, 50.5 receiving yards. Like I said, I think maybe you have a higher ceiling with Waddle, but still. Okay, let me go ahead and complete that and refresh, see if we can get some more questions coming in. Looks like we don't have many questions at all to go through from here on out. So if you ask a question on the site, it should be answered relatively quickly. And also, obviously, if you don't have a question in and you still want to get whatever your question is answered during the stream, you could always go hit the link in the live chat that says ask a question here. Or go over to flockfantasy.com, same place. Just do you type it in or do you hit the link? And hit the expert advice button in the top right corner. There you can ask a super message, starts a question, trade question, or a team review, whatever you're wanting. I would highly recommend if you wanted that team review, however, that you go through and you take advantage of the offer that we have on Underdog Fantasy, especially this week because you actually have the free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard, for anybody who's ever used code FLOCK and Underdog. It doesn't matter if you use code FLOCK last year, yesterday, today, or tomorrow, or 3 years ago. As long as you use code FLOCK, you'll have the free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard. Also, you're going to be getting a free Dak Prescott pick, more than less than half a total yard as well. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy, and you'll be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000, plus a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single day. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way we're able to go ahead and credit you with that free team review voucher. Now, moving this over to our next question. It's coming up from Yala. It says, hey, Mason, I have a pretty deep bench, 6-1 at the moment. If possible, should I trade Puka for Collins? Thank you. Thank you. Puka versus Collins. I would rather have Puka. Collins is guaranteed to miss another 3 weeks. I think I would rather have Collins points per game rest of season. I mean, obviously, if you were 6-1 and you were saying, Mason, I legitimately never need to think about the regular season. The only thing is the fantasy football playoffs, but also we can be playing for the bye as well. I think we go ahead. We still hold on to Deontay Johnson here. It's not the easiest call. Obviously, with Bryce Young under center right now, expectations are at the very bottom end of the barrel here, specifically for what you're getting with this Panthers offense. But Laporte at the same time is out here averaging 3-4 targets a game. It's just been the absolute worst thing in the world. So honestly, I think maybe we're doing a little bit too much here with these trades. If you wanted to wait another week and get another week of production out of Puka and then look to sell him for Collins, you could. As you have multiple weeks of Collins still on the IR, and at the same time, Collins still has the week 14 bye too, where Puka's already through his bye. So you're going to get an extra 3 games out of Puka in comparison. So it's close. It's close. It's close on both deals, to be honest. But need help with quarterback and flex spots from Who's Ryan. Here, quarterback, Gino, you have no Metcalf. Baker, you have no Godwin and no Evans. Can I see what the implied team totals are for these offenses again? Week 8 implied team totals. I expect the Seahawks to be a little bit more of a rush-heavy offense than what we have with Tampa. Right now, sportsbooks are putting the Seahawks with an implied team total of 21.25 points. I believe this has come down. And the Bucs with 21.5. Expect the Bucs to be more pass-happy as well. I probably go with Baker, but it's extremely close. If DK plays, you for sure go Geno. If DK plays, you for sure go Geno. Going down to the flex spot. If T. Higgins plays, you go with Higgins. If Higgins doesn't play, you go McLaurin, which right now it does look like things are trending in the direction where T. Higgins is not going to be playing. So more likely than not, you're probably going to go ahead and you're going to be playing Terry McLaurin. Now, Chubby's coming out and says, it's been tough. 5 losses by less than 6 points. Please help. I'm very sorry, my friend. You just sent in a super message, so there's not really anything I can do with this. If you're wanting a trade, if you wanted a trade question or a start sit question, I'll grant you with the free start sit question voucher, just in case you intended to ask a start sit and get some help with your lineup. But yeah, I'll send that over your way. But if you just send in a super message, I can't really see anything. Phoenix Lance, always happy to see you coming out here. Wide receiver. We are most likely going to go ahead and take Demario Douglas this week. Don't really like the matchup, but obviously we have gotten the improvement in the offense from Drake May. Going over to tight end, Evan Ingram, absolute must-start option here. And then down for the flex. Dear God. I think we go Dowdle and send up a prayer that Dalvin really doesn't do anything, which I'm assuming more likely than not, Dalvin's not going to do much. But I don't know. There is a risk, not that Dalvin comes out and crushes, but if Dalvin comes out and sees 30% of the snaps, then, I mean, it is something to be worried about. Now, moving this over for Robert, says, Higgins might be out. Who should we play? Okay, Tyreek, and if you have no Higgins, a Waddle. And then down in the flex, we have Amari as well. I mean, this team's just absolutely chilling. And we have Adams too. Did I skip over Adams? Yes, we did. Dear God, never mind. We don't even play Waddle. We go with Tyreek, Adams, and Amari. And you are the last person that needs to be stressing on if you're potentially going to have no Higgins or not. You have just a ridiculous amount of wide receiver depth here. Now, moving over to our next question, coming out from Georgia, says, full BBR, 0 points from the Niners defense versus the top guy in my league. Probably need high floors to make up for it. I'm assuming we actually need probably high ceilings, to be honest. If we're chasing a high ceiling here, I think we're going to go with Jaden Reed. Obviously, Reed, I mean, has been more so a boom-bust option this year. Not consistently seeing the target volume, but getting the big plays and a great offense. Going over to tight ends, I think you just go ahead and you play Travis Kelce. Great matchup against the Raiders here. Sportsbooks are projecting the Chiefs to be a top 5-ish scoring offense in the NFL this week. So I think go ahead, you play Kelce, you play Reed, and pretty easy to choose these two if we're chasing the ceiling. If you needed the floor, I think you go Chuba. Now, Bong's Away coming out says, current running backs are now Taylor, Jones, CMC. Receivers are Neighbors, Nico, Kirk, Pittman, with Trey at tight ends. Well, here, Chase to Neighbors, downgrade. Javonte to McCaffrey, massive upgrade. Or pay and shove to get it done. Mostert's almost a 0. We don't need the CMC production right now. If you believe CMC comes back after the bye and is at a mid to high-end RB1, then the McCaffrey side is the winner of this. If we operate under that assumption, the McCaffrey side is the winner. Now, obviously, it is not inherently a guarantee that McCaffrey is coming out, so that is going to be a tougher spot. Now, going over to our next question from Michael Cave. Here's the trade question. It says, trade away either Mason Hunt in a package for an upgrade listed all players which I could negotiate. Trade either Mason or Hunt in a package for an upgrade. I listed all players which I could negotiate. Okay, I got you. So we're looking to trade away Hunts and a package to go get an upgrade at running back for the long term. Maybe here Hunts, and if we were looking to sell anybody else, maybe go Hunt Hop. Honestly, I think Brian Robinson may not be the worst move there. I would love to go Hunt Hop to get to Achane. I would love to go Hunt Hop to get to Aaron Jones. I think those would be some ideas. My thing with Debo is I don't want to be selling Debo right now. Debo comes out of the bye week in 2 weeks with no Ayuk in this offense. Debo's arguably a top 5 receiver in fantasy. I think Waddle's going to be so much better now that Tua is back in. I think if you're looking to sell those guys, you're selling them low. I don't think you're going to get anything for McMillan. So if we're looking to get a nice return here, Hopkins is really the only player I think you could squeeze some value out of. Yeah, and I think you try to pivot over to one of these options like Aaron Jones. Now, Evan coming out with a massive team review. Appreciate you, my guy. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question, start sit question. I see the team name. We don't suck much. We've looked at this team a couple times. Says, hey, Mason, back for a 4th team review. This is a 2 receiver, 2 running back, 2 flex. Can start 4 receivers. I'm 4-3. Was able to get Hopkins before he got traded. Cut Goddard for Njoku. Looks great. Now I'm trying to shop him and other pieces for something. Trying to see if you have any suggestions on what to do now. So this is the 3rd team in the league analyzer. Looks like we are climbing up. We are 4-3 at the moment. Right now, I think that the first thing that I could say is there are very interesting receivers that are sitting out here. The first thing that I do with this team is I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to drop Sutton. I'm going to drop Wicks. And we're going to be picking up Ricky Pearsall and Josh Downs as well. I just think that you have a much better range of outcomes with these younger ascending. I mean, I know Wicks is young, but with Wicks, arguably the 4th option in his offense. So if we could drop Wicks, Sutton, and pick up Ricky Pearsall and Josh Downs, I think we would look to do so. I mean, I just, realistically speaking, don't see how you could ever view Sutton as a player that turns into an every week must-start option. Looking at I don't know. Look at the fact that the Broncos dropped 30 points last week, and Sutton still gives you the goose egg. Going over to quarterback, we have Dak, Russ. So effectively, we are just kind of streaming the quarterback position, playing matchups here. I'm going over to the waiver wire. It's not like there are great players on waivers. So completely fine rostering 2 QBs and just playing the matchups between both of them. Going over to running back, we have Kyron Taylor. So we have 2 top 10 running backs rest of season. Obviously, Taylor coming back is going to help this team out in a big time way. We also have Jonathan Brooks for some long-term upside in terms of running back depth pieces. Not necessarily there. So it's not a league in which I think we need to be optimizing a 2-for-1 deal so we can go out there and we can pick up another running back off the waiver wire. I don't think that's too appealing, to be honest. Going over to receiver, we have Nico Collins, Brian Thomas, Terry McLaurin, DeAndre Hopkins. So Nico Collins, obviously, we are 2 weeks into the IR stint, so 2 weeks closer to getting him back. Brian Thomas will be a great wide receiver 2. McLaurin will be a great wide receiver 3 for this team. You have the upside for Hopkins. We have Lockett to play in the short term, potentially with no Metcalf. Obviously, we're not trusting Hopkins his first weekend. Nico's still injured. Sutton Wicks, I would say typically when we're the stronger receiver, at least in the long term, we don't necessarily need to be rostering this many options, and we could potentially go get another running back. But my thing is specifically with your roster here, I think that you're actually in a much better spot with the waiver wire options at receiver than RB, where you have Ricky Pearsall and Josh Downs both out there on the waiver wire. And then going over to tight ends, we dropped Goddard to pick up David Njoku, which looks like a great call right now. I mean, if you could potentially move off one of these tight ends to a team that is extremely desperate, this team's starting Pat Freiermuth at the moment. I mean, if you wanted to maybe trade, say, Nico Collins and David Njoku to go get to A.J. Brown, you would get 3 more games out of A.J. Brown in the regular season than you would get from Nico Collins, assuming that A.J. Brown stays healthy, of course. But we get the 3 extra weeks. We have a comparable points per game mark rest of season. Then we can just go through and we can pick up Dallas Goedert for free off the waiver wire, which obviously I don't think that Dallas Goedert's a better option than David Njoku, but I do think that he would be a viable plug-and-play guy for the Trey McBride bye week if need be. So that's what I would look to do if possible. I mean, we can obviously look for some other teams that possibly need a tight end, but I think we make the 2 waiver wire moves that we talked about. This team, if you could potentially go through and do that same deal for Chase, where we go like Nico Collins and Njoku to get to Chase. Issue is this roster just doesn't have too many players that would excite you. And this team here at the very bottom, they have Metcalf. They're 1-6. Obviously, they can't really afford the Metcalf injury. So, I mean, if you could go through and if you could send them like David Njoku and maybe DeAndre Hopkins to pivot over to DK Metcalf, where we can't afford, or maybe even send them Tyler Lockett, David Njoku, and DeAndre Hopkins, and see if we can get Metcalf and Olave and take advantage of the fact that they really need production right now, whereas we can just go through and we can look for the long-term upside. I think that could be a very interesting move for us. And obviously, maybe you could see that team taking it where they're having to play Mark Andrews while at the same time, I mean, they really can't afford to roster any injured players here. And instead, you would think that they would want to be optimizing. They just go get some points in the lineup ASAP. But obviously, not expecting all those get done. We are hoping that one of our league mates we can take advantage of and squeeze one of those through, with them desperately needing a tight end and with them possibly needing some of the depth, which I think we could look to make that swing. But I really do appreciate you. Like I said, definitely at the very minimum, we want to drop Sutton and Wicks and pick up Downs and Pearsall. But I also hooked you up with that free trade question and that free start sit question. So if you have any additional trades that you would have sent my way, I'd be super happy to check those out for you. But thank you again. I really appreciate you as always. And yeah, thank you. Wishing the best of luck, of course. Now moving this over to our next question. It's coming out from M. Biangoy. Says, first year playing fantasy, what's my next move? So thank you so much for taking advantage of that free Underdog team review. This is Darius Sanders. We are down here with the 8th spot in the league analyzer, which doesn't seem great, but if you look at the league, it is a pretty even league in general. You have the top 4 teams, then this little group of 2 teams in the middle, then the bottom 3, and then the garbage one. We are currently at 3-4. It is a 10-team league in which you can start 4 receivers weekly, so you can make an argument that wide receiver depth matters somewhat. Now, the first thing that I would do in terms of waiver wire pivots is I would cut Hunter Henry and I'd pick up TJ Hawkinson. I just think that you have a much better ceiling with Hawkinson rest of season based off what we have seen with his career, and the fact that, I mean, this offense obviously in Minnesota is better than a lot of people expected, and definitely better than what I expected it to be. I think the other pivot that I would look to make myself is I think I'd potentially look to actually move off of Jalen Warren and pick up Zach Charbonnet. We have seen Charbonnet in the instance of a Kenneth Walker injury turn into an every week must start running back, an absolute no-brainer play. Now, obviously, there is a chance that that is still the case where Jalen Warren has that kind of upside, where if you were to potentially get an injury to Najee Harris, Jalen Warren becomes a must-start every week player as well. But it's not inherently a guarantee there with Warren, where we've already seen it from Najee, of course. Now, going over to the quarterback position, we are currently rolling with Geno and Caleb. So 2 quarterbacks that we're just kind of playing the matchups with, right? Kind of effectively just streaming the position, to be honest. Going over to what you have on the waiver wire. Currently, the quarterback position, you have guys like Darnold, Cousins. So if you wanted to pivot from Geno to Darnold, I'm not going to fault you at all for doing so, but definitely not something that we have to look at. Going over to what we have at running back, we're currently sitting with Kyron Williams, Christian McCaffrey. So we have an elite RB1 here at the top end. We have an RB1 with upside if he is able to come back in. By no means is it a guarantee here with CMC, of course. Dobbins, great RB2 play in the meantime. I mean, Zach Moss, at the very minimum, you can still say he is the top end handcuff, or if anything were to happen to Chase Brown, he comes out here and he just absolutely dominates. Going over to receiver, you have Harrison, you have Reed. So wide receiver is probably going to be the weak spot on this roster. In terms of how we could go through and make a trade to potentially upgrade the wide receiver position, what could we potentially afford to get rid of here? I mean, right now, if we're looking at this, we need Dobbins to play until McCaffrey comes back. It's not like we have an extra quarterback that people would be very excited to trade for. Honestly, with this team, what I would potentially look to do is I'd make the waiver wire pivots that we discussed previously. I think you could also drop Shakir for Keon Coleman as well. I think you have the upside that Keon continues to expand his role in Buffalo. You drop Henry for Hawkinson. You drop Warren for Charbonnet. And then I'm probably not looking to make any trades with this team right now. However, I would really be interested in, once we get McCaffrey back in, then maybe at that point, if you could potentially go through and if you could potentially look to sell, say, J.K. Dobbins in a 2-for-1 deal with a receiver like DJ Moore or Jaden Reed or Harrison to go get to a wide receiver that you're a lot more excited about, you can look at that potential move. But obviously, a lot would hinge on if McCaffrey is viable, which we are having to wait and to see if we get him. But I really appreciate you. Definitely make the waiver wire moves we talked about right now. But I think in terms of the trade, probably holding off until we get McCaffrey back in, just because I don't think we have the depth otherwise. Now, going over to Crow's season, here at wide receiver, we're going to be jamming in Garrett Wilson as well as probably Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, George Pickens is not going to hit our flex. We're going to go with Josh Jacobs. You know what? I can't do it. We're going to have to go Pickens over Harrison, sadly. I mean, obviously, Harrison, I still would rank higher in my rest of season rankings. The issue is that just for the role that you have right now, the man is just kind of operating as the field stretcher in Arizona, has been extremely disappointing, and is difficult to try to come out here and make a strong argument for. Now, going over to our next question. This one coming out from Cole McCoy. This is a massive dono with the team review. Really appreciate you. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free start sit question, just in case you'll have anything else that you want to send my way. Here says, I'm new to fantasy and drafted CMC, been an uphill climb, but on a 2-game win streak after a trade for Amon-Ra St. Brown and Gibbs. Any suggestions for a second running back or how to proceed? Thanks for all you do. No, thank you so much. Really do appreciate you and checking this out. We are the second team in the league analyzer here, so we do have a considerable amount of value. Going through and looking at it, so we started off 0-5. So I think you made the right move. I'm assuming that you went through and you traded away McCaffrey, and that's how we were able to get to Gibbs. That's how we were able to get to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would say for most people, like, I actually think McCaffrey is a great buy low candidate. However, obviously it's very different based off team to team. If you started off 0-5, you were 100% right. You had to go into full-blown panic mode. How do I win right this second? And selling McCaffrey was 100% the right move to make. Now, in terms of what we are doing with this team going into the future, I mean, this is a roster in which at quarterback, we are kind of playing the matchups between Goff as well as Mahomes. Looking at what we have here at QB, the options on the waiver wire don't look super inspiring. I mean, right now, you are looking at, say, Drake May as the best player. So I definitely roster 2. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. So quarterback depth is going to be very important. I'm sorry. So wide receiver depth is not going to be very important, but quarterback production at the top end will be. But ultimately, I think you're fine just chilling as is, playing the matchups. Going over to running back, this is a situation in which you're not thinking long-term upside, of course. We are just thinking about how we get production in this lineup right this second. We have Gibbs, locked and loaded RB1 for now and the long term. Kareem Hunt, Jordan Mason maybe are viewed as, I mean, short-term plays if you get Pacheco back in the long term, if you get McCaffrey back in after the bye. But those things aren't necessarily guarantees. So what I would look to do here is I would look to hold Hunt and Jordan Mason on a 2-5 team. Where, I mean, if this was a roster instead that was, I don't know, maybe 5-2, then it would be the exact opposite. I'm looking to pivot off these guys and go get some long-term viable running backs where our options may not be for the playoffs, but it doesn't frankly matter. Looking at the running backs that you have available on waivers, obviously we're not looking to cut any of these guys. Ray Davis would be a fine like handcuff back, obviously, where if you were to get an injury to James Cook, Ray Davis does kind of turn into an every week starter. But I don't think you need to make a pivot there. Going over to receiver, we have St. Brown Neighbors who can play every single week. Obviously, the Higgins injury hurts, but who cares? Because we're going to be able to jam in Jordan Mason in the flex spot anyway in the short term. One thing I really don't like is I don't like rostering 3 tight ends here. I definitely think we have to let go of a couple tight ends, especially when you have McBride here. McBride just has so much value. So I would for sure cut. If we didn't have TJ Hawkinson on the IR, I would say you cut 1 tight end and hold on to your other favorite option. But for me here specifically, I mean, you're in a spot in which Hawkinson's on the IR. Hawkinson's on the waiver wire. I'd rather have Hawkinson over Andrews. I would rather have Hawkinson over Henry. So I would love to just go through and potentially cut both Andrews and Hunter Henry, pick up TJ Hawkinson off the waiver wire. We'll have another roster spot as well. Then at that point, we can go ahead and, I mean, maybe the best pickup would be Jerry Jeudy if you're really worried about the T. Higgins injury. If not, you probably go with the handcuff back with Ray Davis in the hopes that if James Cook were to get injured, he could turn into the next Jordan Mason, the next Kareem Hunt. But ultimately, for how this team's situated right now in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format where the depth doesn't matter much, where we're 2-5, so we need to be thinking about short-term production. We've already latched on to these short-term producers at discounts because they'll have shaky long-term value. We've already kind of pivoted away from wide receiver depth. So I think you're in a great spot. Really, the only thing I would look to do with this team is Obviously, if you could sell Andrews and Pearsall and go get a wide receiver upgrade, if you could sell Hunter Henry and Nick Chubb and go get a running back upgrade, you go ahead, you try to sell one of the tight ends. I mean, if we can find a team here that's just absolutely desperate at the tight end position, this team's starting Dalton Schultz every single week. Maybe they'd be interested in getting Mark Andrews. So instead of just going through and cutting Andrews, if you wanted to try to sell him in a package with Ricky Pearsall and get to George Pickens or get to Xavier Worthy, I think that is something that you could look to do with your roster. But again, we have the elite option with McBride. We can pick up Hawkinson for free off the waiver wire. So for me, I'd probably just go through and look to move on from them one way or another. But I really do appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way with this. And again, I did hook you up with that free start sit question and that free trade question as well. So if you have anything else that you want to send my way, don't hesitate to. I'd be super happy to help you out in any way that I can. Now moving this over for Joey, says I got CMC, Mason, and Tank Dell. Okay, so you got Jordan Mason on the other side as well. So going from Jalen McMillan to Tank Dell, upgrade, not a massive one, but upgrade. Would we rather have Brian Thomas and HN or CMC and Jordan Mason? I'd probably rather have the Jordan Mason and CMC side. Like I would rank Mason ahead of HN this week. If CMC's back after the bye, I'd rank CMC ahead of him. If you're telling me you have enough wide receiver depth, I do want to be on record. I think Brian Thomas is an absolute crusher rest of season. I think Thomas is a high-end wide receiver 2. I think HN's a low-end RB1. But if you are looking at what you have with a CMC, if CMC comes back after the bye week, I think all of a sudden you are looking at a running back that is a top 3 option. But Jason Can says, how do we get the free team review from Underdog? So obviously, one, go use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. You'll get the free team review. You'll get the free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard for Monday night. And you'll get the free Dak Prescott pick, more than less than half a total yard for Monday night. You'll get the 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. For the team review, all you need to do is set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. And every morning, Underdog sends me a list of all the email addresses that used promo code FLOCK on Underdog from the day prior. I send that list, it's a CSV format, over to one of the developers, and they go through and they run a program. In every account on flockfantasy.com that has an email that matches one of those, it's a free team review voucher. And then to redeem your free team review voucher, you just go through the same process that anybody would if they wanted to ask any question over there on the site, where you would just go over and you would hit the expert advice button in the top right corner. You would go through the team review process here. Obviously, you're going to get a free team review voucher. So if you want to do like a trade question, start set question, or send a super message, that would still cost something. But the team review to myself should be free. And just go through this team review thing. You can also check on your account page to see if you have the voucher. And if you wait over 24 hours and you still don't have your voucher, you can shoot me an email at mason.flockfantasy.com and I can figure out what's taken along for you, my friend. But let's move this over to our next question. And obviously, if y'all wanted to take advantage of that, you can find the link in the live chat that says free Malik Neighbors pick there. You get the free picks plus, obviously, the free team review as well. Using our next question, this is high wattage. This is a easy call here at running back with Montgomery in the best matchup you could ever ask for. And then going over to the flex spots, really Devonta Smith or Brian Robinson. I probably play it safe. You just have an absolute nutso team, so I think you can play Robinson here. The matchup against the Bears obviously isn't great. With Devonta Smith, they're probably going to have to throw the ball a decent amount going up against Cincinnati, but I don't know. For me, I think you get a really nice floor ceiling combo with Robinson. Now, Dorjan coming out with a trade question says, did I cook with this trade sent to me? Wandale is almost a 0. I have Wandale in a lot of underdog drafts. I really hope Wandale Robinson comes out here and crushes. But the reality of the situation is Wandale Robinson is the wide receiver 2 in the worst offense in the NFL at the moment. or this second. I mean, this week it projects to be the worst offense in the league, but a lot of that obviously has to do with it being a tougher matchup going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But even going into the future, an offense that projects to be one of the worst in the league. So I, myself, am not excited about Wan'Dale at all. I would much prefer Deebo Samuel over Marvin Harrison Jr. If you look at Deebo, I think if he's fully healthy coming out of the bye week with no Ayuk, he could potentially be a top 5 receiver. So I think go ahead. You can roll with the Deebo side. I hope Wan'Dale crushes. I really do. But I think it'd be tough to go in that direction. But we have 7 questions to get through right now that are in the queue. So if you wanted to get your question in, obviously you can always go to the live chat that says ask a question here, and it would be answered very, very quickly. But Lil Noah says they offered JT or Kamara. Love the videos, Mason. Really appreciate it, my guy. This is a full PPR format. Regardless of how you cut it, I think I probably make this deal. I think going from Chase to Kupp's a clear downgrade. From Chubb to Kamara is a clear upgrade. Can y'all please spam the chat? Would you rather have Jonathan Taylor or Alvin Kamara rest of season? Can you please let me know in the live chat? Are you going to go with Jonathan Taylor or Alvin Kamara rest of season? And we also just hit 500 likes on this live stream, so thank you so much for everybody who's hit that like button. It does look like it's fewer than 1% of you. I mean, 5% of y'all, but thank you to the 5%. But we got JT. Johnny, I've replied. If you emailed me a week ago, I've responded to all emails that were from a week ago. So did you email mason.@flockfantasy.com? Send it to a different email. Can't help you, buddy. Kamara, JT, Kamara, JT. It looks like people are split. Like I said, I'm an idiot. What do I know? I view the floor that Kamara gives you as a receiver. I probably go Kamara once Derek Carr is back in. Now, obviously, if Spencer Rattler was here the entire time, you definitely go with JT. Regardless, I think you can go ahead. I think you can take this deal. I mean, I have Jamar Chase in the Flock League. I'd trade Chase for this package in a heartbeat. And I view Chubb, of course I could be wrong here, but how I view Chubb, just to let you know, is low-end RB2, high-end RB3. He's not going to have the receiving role. He's going to be in a garbage offense. So, I don't know. But Lavi coming out says, huge fan of the Flock. Thank you, my friend. With Collins out, we are needing a flex spot. Well, this is a monstrous team. Chase Brown, super easy play here. Outside of that, I think a lot of people are going to get suckered into Cedric Tillman. If you look at Tillman, this is projecting out to be a bottom 3 offense in points scored. I do believe Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku are the top 2 options in this passing attack. So I think Tillman's the number 3 option on one of the worst offenses in the league. It's not super excited. I think we probably go ahead, and I think we probably roll the dice with Ricky Pearsall. Obviously, if you were to have no Deebo Samuel, Pearsall is a lot more interesting. But, I mean, even with no Ayuk, no Jennings, he could be viable. Now, Preston coming out with a start sit here. Here, running back, we're going to go ahead. We're going to get in Chase Brown relatively easily. I don't know why we didn't start Kyron. Honestly, I'm assuming you just didn't put Kyron in here. I'm going to throw Kyron in because I'm assuming you played him on Thursday. If you didn't play him on Thursday, I don't know what you're smoking. We're going to go to Devonta Smith here in the flex. And obviously, if we didn't play Kyron on Thursday, then we go with Chase Brown. But I don't know why we won enough. But Flip Flap, happy to see it. Thank you so much for coming out. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question as well here. It says 5-2 currently, was able to trade Pollard and Wilson for Lamb. Feeling like I let myself get exposed at running back. Any advice? Okay. So looking at this. And like I said, if you're having a voucher issue, email me mason.@flockfantasy.com and I can try to sort it out for you. Yeah. If you signed up to Underdog right this second, you're not going to get the voucher until tomorrow. Like I said, Underdog sends us the list of all the email addresses tomorrow, and that's when the voucher gets applied. But trading Pollard and Wilson for Lamb is an absolute no-brainer trade. Maybe it looks a little bit dumb in the short term when you have no Spears and Pollard's going to be crushing, but in terms of what we have in the long term here, oh dear God, we need help at running back. Oh dear God. Never mind. We may be scrambling, but anyway, I think the value's there for us to make that trade. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. So, I mean, the wide receiver depth, not going to be super important. Depth in general is not, but oh, look at the running back position. Ugh. Okay. We are 5-2. That's good news. We got time to sort this out. We're sitting with Jared Goff, Anthony Richardson right now at quarterback. So, effectively, we are just playing the matchups here at the quarterback position. Going over to what we have on the waiver wire, we have like Stafford, Lawrence, Herbert. So it's not like we have great options here. So I think we just leave both quarterbacks on our roster, and we just pick our favorite matchups from week-to-week perspective, roll as is. Going over to running back, we have Bijan Robinson, which is the anchor, thank God. He's not through his bye week. Week 12, are we really starting? Jalen Warren and Roschon Johnson. So the plan here is obviously either A, trade for a running back, or B, we go through and we try our absolute best to find the next Jordan Mason, find the next Kareem Hunt, find the next Zach Charbonnet when he had the short-term fill-in, find the next short-term viable option that's thrusted up due to an injury. We're already trying to do that with a couple of these handcuffs down here at the bottom with Algier, Warren, Roschon, and Dalvin. If possible, I would like to try to go one step further in this, and I would like to try to just roster as many running backs as we possibly could here. So first thing is, if George Kittle is good to go tomorrow, you cut Zach Ertz. I understand, yes, George Kittle has the bye week next week, but we just want to have as many shots at the running back position here with somebody possibly seeing an injury to stepping into a workload. So you would go pick up Trey Benson, because what if James Conner goes down next week and then all of a sudden Benson is good to go in the future? Wide receiver, we're sitting pretty. We have Lamb, A.J. Brown, Waddle, our 2 wide receivers and our flex every single week. Tight end, we have an elite tight end. So the thing is, you have an anchor RB with Bijan. We have the elite receivers. We have a great flex. We have an elite tight end. It's just all about how you find that running back too. I wouldn't want to say like, oh, let's trade Jalen Waddle and let's go get an RB2, because the thing is, oh crap, then we need a flex. Oh, let's go trade Kittle. Let's go get an RB2. Well, then we need a tight end. So in terms of trades, I think once you've already sold all your depth, there's not really any way to go back from here. Clearly, we can say that running back is the biggest need for this team. And I mean, maybe if Jared Goff comes out and has 500 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns and gives his best Kirk Cousins impression, and you're able to potentially flip Goff for a running back at that point and roll with pick up another streaming option and play the match between him and Anthony Richardson. Or if Anthony Richardson has 300 passing yards, 100 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns randomly, if all of a sudden you're able to sell a Richardson and go get a viable running back, obviously that makes a lot of sense. But for now, you're not going to get anything for these guys. Going over to what we have at tight ends, like I said, I don't think we can sell them. Realistically speaking, I don't know what you could be looking to do here, other than just saying, yeah, we clearly need help at running back. The easiest way to go about that in my mind is to go through and try to roster as many running backs as possible. So I think we go pick up the names like Emmanuel Wilson, who's an injury away from making a difference. Blake Corum, who's an injury away from making a difference. Trey Benson, who's an injury away from making a difference. You maybe move on from the players that have no path to hitting your starting lineup, like Zach Ertz, Jalen Tolbert, And then obviously during the Kittle bye week next week, then we'll pick up backup tight ends. If we ever needed a streaming wide receiver, which Lamb, A.J. Brown, Waddle are already all through their bye, you'd always go to the waiver wire and look at guys like Judy and Christian Watson. So I think you cut Tolbert. If Kittle's good to go, you cut Ertz. We pick up a couple of running backs off waivers, try to find the next Jordan Mason. The thing is we're 5-2, so we have some flexibility. And also, we have Lamb, A.J. Brown, Waddle, Kittle, Bijan. Even if we're lackluster at running back 2, you still could just completely crush any of your matchups any given week. So personally, that is what I would look to do, my friend. I really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. If you do have a trade that comes across your way, like I said, I did hook you up with that free trade question. I hooked you up with the free start sit question as well. So if you have anything else you want to send my way, don't hesitate. I'd be happy to look at it for you. But really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. Now, Stanton coming out says, leaning Javonte if Higgins is out. What do you think? Thanks. I think I'd maybe play Javonte straight up over Higgins. Javonte here. You have so many great calls. Like, I go Javonte over Higgins now that Higgins is banged up. Like, we've seen Higgins in the past be active and then play one snap. With Javonte, you have a top 5 point projection for the Denver Broncos offense this week with how good the matchup is against Carolina, according to Vegas Sportsbooks. And I will say real quick, I know people are annoyed with me. I read some comments, people annoyed that I keep continuously reference sportsbook projections, but I do want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. The reason we consistently reference sportsbook projections in terms of the implied team totals and spreads of games and trying to figure out game environments and what offenses we want to be playing, what offenses we want to be avoiding, is it has been proven time and time again that sportsbooks have more data than I do, than you do. They know more than I do. They know more than you do. They will be more accurate. So if I see, maybe I think the Denver Broncos have a bad offense, but I see sportsbooks go out there and tell us, no, you should expect them to be a top 5-ish scoring offense this week. Or maybe you're a Giants fan and you think that, no, the Giants offense, it's underrated. It's great. Then you see the Giants have the lowest implied team total in the NFL this week. That's something that matters. That's something you really need to consider. And I promise you, I'm going to keep referring to Las Vegas Sportsbook projections going into the future, just because I do think that it's by far and away the best starting point in terms of looking at environments and offensive expectations. But anyway, with all that being said, they have Denver as a top 5 offense this week in a great matchup as almost 10-point favorites against Carolina. So they should be able to, or at least presumably be able to, run the ball over and over and over again. I'm really excited about it. I think you go ahead and I think you just jam in Javonte. Now let's move over to our next question coming out from Evan. It's a trade where we're sending Sutton, Taylor, and McLaurin for Breece and Puka. Oh, this is Breece and Puka easily. Not even remotely close. Give me Breece over Taylor. Give me Puka over McLaurin. Sutton's not even worth a roster spot, so I absolutely love this deal. Love it. Now, Trey Willie coming out with our next question. This is a start-sit question where we are looking at tight ends. I think you go ahead and you play Kraft. Obviously, it has been a little bit of a watered-down target share now that you have the secondary receivers back in for this team. And then Jacobs is just going to be a must-start player every single week. Hell, I'd play Jacobs over DJ Moore, especially in this matchup against the Jags. Jacobs, great offense. Consistently, the Packers project out to be a top 3 to 5 scoring offense in the NFL every single week. Right now, I think they projected to be the second highest scoring offense in the league. And Jacobs has a 3-down role and seeing pretty much 20-plus opportunities every game. So let me refresh this, see if we have any more questions coming in. This one coming out from Quirky Catboy says, 1-6, was I cooking? There is more value on the Christian McCaffrey and Jaden Daniels side of this. If you were 6-1, I would say, oh my gosh, this was a massive mistake. Daniels, obviously one of the best fantasy QBs Across the board, McCaffrey possibly only has one fewer game played than Bijan the rest of the way. But on a 1-6 team, sadly, you may have no other option but to go through and but to take a player that's actually going to play. So I don't mind you making this trade for Bijan. Last thing I'm going to say is, last thing I would ever say is like, oh, you cooked with this. Great deal for Bijan. Like, you gave up a lot. But if this was the best that you were going to get for your injured guys on a 1-6 team, obviously you maybe had to take advantage. Now, Hogan coming out with a trade question. Here, this is Javonte, Najee, Cup versus James Cook and Nico Collins. Cup to Collins, give me Collins. Javonte and Najee to James Cook, give me James Cook. I think we go with the James Cook, Nico Collins side if you can think about the long-term upside. But, of course, I say this with full knowledge that Javonte is going to absolutely destroy the Panthers this week. And it may look like I was an idiot to say this. So, I'm going to go with the James Cook, Nico Collins side, but I don't think it's super easy. Now, I'm so terrible at fantasy, coming out with a free team review. Appreciate you, my guy. Says, I feel like I'm in a decent spot, but I want to make it a better one. It's been really hard to try to make any trades for top receivers. Do we have any suggestions? Team name here is the Hertz Locker. So we are 5th in the league analyzer. We are currently 5-2. So being 5-2, obviously you're in a spot in which we can think a little bit more long-term rather than short-term. There are great waiver wire options in this league. You have guys like Cade Otton, Roma Dunze, Jamison Williams, Romeo Dobbs, all out there on the waiver wire. So in general, whenever you're able to go out there and when you're able to pick up somebody like Cade Otton for completely free, it does make you highly incentivized to go ahead and make as many 2-for-1 deals as you possibly can. Like the first thing I would do here, seeing Cade Otton on the waiver wire, is if you're able to squeeze out some value from Evan Ingram, not saying Otton's better than Evan Ingram by any means, but if we can get a meaningful upgrade here with the trade, like this team's starting Noah Fant, they're 1-6. Maybe they're just completely done skis. But I mean, if you could go through and if you could trade them like Evan Ingram and Jaden Reed to pivot over to Amon-Ra St. Brown, it'd be an absolute no-brainer. Obviously, much, much easier said than done. This team's starting Frymuth every week. If you can go send them maybe TJ Hawkinson, Jaden Reed to pivot over to Cooper Kupp, I think that'd be a no-brainer. If you wanted to try to send them maybe Evan Ingram straight up for Zay Flowers, I think you could do that as well. I'm definitely a little more interested in potentially going through and making that 2-for-1 deal to open up the roster spot. That way we can pick up Cade Otton off the waiver wire for free. And we have Cade Otton who can play in the short term with the injury to both Evans and Godwin. While at the same time, you'll also have TJ Hawkinson for some long-term upside here as well, coming back in next week. Looking at quarterback, obviously, we are absolutely crushing with Jalen Hurts. We're able to start Jalen Hurts every single week, regardless of matchup, already through the bye. Absolutely love to see it. Running back, we are sitting with Jonathan Taylor, Devon Achane. So we have 2 RB1s here, rest of season. Tony Pollard, Tank Bigsby, Raheem Mostert. I think I would cut Raheem Mostert and pick up Roma Dunze myself. Even in a league where we only start 2 receivers and 1 flex, where we are kind of loaded at wide receiver, I still think you maybe have more upside off the waiver wire with Rome. One other thing that I think could make a lot of sense here is with this being a league where you only start 2 receivers in a flex, if you wanted to potentially try to send like Terry McLaurin and Tony Pollard and go get a meaningful upgrade at the running back position for that flex spot, I think that would be something that we would really like to do if possible. Because, I mean, if you're looking at Bigsby just reasonably, I don't see how he hits this starting lineup for you when we have the top end guys. We're 5-2. We're thinking more long term here as well, unless you think there's a chance that ETN does get dealt. But, I mean, I think you could presumably get a really, really strong running back in that case. And then we could just go out there. We could pick up Rome Odunze for free. And you don't really need to drop Raheem Mostert if you were wanting to hold on to him. Obviously, it's a really strong team. We're 5-2 for a reason. I mean, we have Reed, DJ Moore, Amari, and Terry McLaurin at wide receiver. Ultimately, just the few things that I'm looking to do. One, if we can trade a tight end and a wide receiver to go get that wide receiver upgrade. Two, if we can maybe trade the lower end wide receiver and running back combo with Terry and Bigsby on this team to go get that upgrade at running back. If we can make that tight end wide receiver upgrade 2-for-1 deal, you pick up Cade Otton as a backfill option at tight end. If you can trade a receiver and a running back to go get that RB upgrade, we pick up Rome Odunze as a backfill wide receiver. And if you can't do any of it, I still would consider dropping Raheem Mostert for Rome Odunze straight up. But I really appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way with this. But obviously, super strong team, a 5-2 for a reason. I think you are cruising. Now, Isaac coming out with another free team review says, hey, Mason, love the streams and the videos. I'm not sure what to do next. I'm loaded at receiver, so I think I should trade a receiver or two for a running back since we're losing Mason soon, but I don't know what to do. Thanks. Thank you. Well, it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. So definitely whenever you can sell the wide receiver depth, is what we want to do. There are 3 juggernauts in this league. We are one of them, which you really like to see. We are 5-2. And yeah, we are rostering way too many receivers here in the first place. So, I mean, I will say right away, even if you cannot trade a wide receiver with Jordan Mason and go get a running back upgrade, which is plan A here, you're going to drop Demario Douglas and you're going to go pick up Zach Charbonnet. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. There's no worlds which you would ever go through and you would start Demario Douglas. Not a single one. So, yeah, a very baseline minimum. You drop Demario Douglas, you go ahead and you pick up Zach Charbonnet. We get a running back depth piece that could be a desperation play, even with Kenneth Walker healthy, but more so just the premium handcuff back with Kenneth Walker in this offense. I'm going over to quarterback, playing the matchups. We played Sam Darnold this week. Honestly, the waiver wire is pretty thin at quarterback, so I think we maybe end up playing Darnold most weeks here. Another thing that you could look to do if you find it difficult to go out there and trade for a running back is we could potentially look to give up a receiver with Darnold and go get that quarterback upgrade. And if you were to make that 2-for-1 deal there, you could also just use the waiver wire to kind of backfill some running back depth. Like say hypothetically you trade Amari Cooper and Sam Darnold and you go get a quarterback you're really excited about every week. You go get somebody like Josh Allen, you go get somebody like Jalen Hurts. Then in that case, we have 1 roster spot that opens up. Then we drop Demario Douglas. Then you can go ahead and you get at the waiver wire. You can pick up Bo, Zach Charbonnet, as well as a Braylon Allen and really build out a running back depth a little bit more. Mixon, Achane, both look like they can be RB1s the rest of season. Really comfortable spot. Jordan Mason, obviously a crusher in the short term. I think definitely the plan right this second, if possible, is let's go and let's see if we can send Devonta Smith and Jordan Mason, Amari Cooper and Jordan Mason, any one of these receivers and Jordan Mason to pivot over to a long-term upgrade at running back. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to target some of the teams that are the worst at wide receiver. I mean, this team, they have Josh Allen in here at quarterback. I have no idea how they are 3-4 right now. But wide receiver 1, they have Zay Flowers. Wide receiver 2, Tyler Lockett. Wide receiver 3, Juju Smith-Schuster. They just lost Chris Godwin. I guess that's how they were 3-4. But yeah, let's go through and let's see if we can send this team, Devonta Smith and Sam Darnold, to go get Josh Allen. Amari Cooper and Sam Darnold to go get Josh Allen. Open up a roster spot that way. Issue is, in terms of their running back room, they don't have any we can be excited about. This team has DK Metcalf injured. They have Jamison Williams suspended. They have Deebo Samuel, kind of injured, and with the bye week upcoming. So, obviously, they have Kamara here. I think you could look to go through and see if we could potentially package together Jordan Mason and the option like Jalen Waddle, or Jordan Mason and Devonta Smith, or Jordan Mason and Amari Cooper to see if we can pivot over to Alvin Kamara. I think that could help out this team in the short term and help our team in the long term. I'm going through and looking at some other teams that could potentially use some help at receiver. This team's wide receiver 3 is JSN. The issue is they just don't have anybody that's that interesting to look at. And they have Bowers, but we obviously are strong at tight end ourselves. Going over, this team is DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver 2, Michael Pittman, wide receiver 3. They're 5-2, so maybe they're not as concerned about the short-term production as somebody like Jordan Mason. So if you were to get to Jahmyr Gibbs, that trade probably looks like Amari Cooper and Devon Achane to go get 2 Gibbs at that point. But I think you can be a little creative with this. While 100% I agree that the main move that you are looking to make, if possible, is we want to be selling the depth receiver and Jordan Mason, and we want to go get that upgrade at running back. I think the other possibility that you have is you could actually sell the depth receiver and Sam Darnold to go get that upgrade at quarterback. I think that helps the team, doesn't impact our starting lineup negatively when we have this many wide receiver pieces, and it opens up a roster spot where we can go ahead and we can take advantage and we can pick up these guys like Charbonnet, Braylon Allen, Jalen Warren, Ray Davis that are an injury away from turning into the next Jordan Mason for completely free. So I think we go out and set a couple of those offers. Depth receiver, Jordan Mason, running back upgrade. Depth receiver, Sam Darnold, quarterback upgrade. With the open roster spots, you backfill running back off the waiver wire with these options at the top. And at the very minimum, even before you do any of this, you cut Demario Douglas and you pick up Zach Charbonnet, where there is no path for Douglas to literally ever hit your starting lineup. But I really appreciate you, and this is the funniest thing that I could ever read in my entire life. We'll get to it in a second. But I hope I was able to help you out in some way. Again, thank you, and I really appreciate you. So obviously we just went on our little spiel of sportsbooks knowing more than you do, knowing more than I do, and typically being more accurate than we are. This is the funniest thing with fantasy football, is when you can prove something over a large sample, and when somebody points at an outlier and goes, but this. It's like going, hey guys, just let you know, most of the time, quarterbacks that go after the first 100 picks in the NFL draft, most of the time they're not going to be Hall of Famers. And then have someone going, well, Tom Brady, how can you say that with Tom Brady? So yeah, obviously there are outliers. So yes, Mason, Vegas had CMC doing great regarding the books. I understand. Yes, sports books were high on. They were high on McCaffrey. They were high on the Niners this year, as everybody was. Of course, it's not that sportsbooks are going to be able to write out the script of the NFL season and know that everything, exactly how it's going to happen. It's that we're all playing the same game. We're all trying to predict an outcome. Can I predict it with 80% success? Can they predict it with 85% success? Obviously, nobody's going to be at 100%. I understand nobody's going to be at 100%. But just because somebody's not 100% doesn't mean that they are not a reliable source of trying to get a baseline with projections. But let's move this over to our next question. This is another one of those free Underdog team reviews coming out from Ahmad Tawakul. Says, hey Mason, love the stream. I don't know what to do here. I have Monty and Gibbs. They've worked out so far because they've gotten around 40 every week, but a little worried they mess up one week and lose me. What do you think the moves we should make? Love the flock. Really appreciate you, my friend. Thank you so much for being a member here. This is Peyton's a free win. We are number 6th in the league analyzer. We are currently sitting at 4-3 as well. So I will say in general, I'm not worried about having both Gibbs and Montgomery on the same roster. I mean, when you take both guys on the same team, obviously make a concentrated bet. You go through and you say, we are going to have this Detroit Lions offense being better than people expect, and this is going to be the best offensive line in the NFL. And if that happens, then both guys absolutely crush, which is exactly what we have seen here. Going over to quarterback, we are rolling with Geno Smith. With Geno, this is a quarterback that I would classify as just a streaming option. Definitely not a player that is an every week must start option regardless of the matchup. I think you can kind of go back and forth here a bit. Going over and looking at the options that you have on the waiver wire, You have guys like Stafford, Anthony Richardson. So you have some upside plays here. Do I think you need to go ahead and need to drop Geno for any of these players? No, not necessarily. But you're in a spot where if you see A-Rich pop off this week with a ton of rushing upside, and then you like him going into the future, obviously we're not married to Geno. I actually may consider starting A-Rich over him this week, just given the fact that Geno doesn't have rushing upside and you have no Metcalf, so I think the passing volume is going to be a little bit lessened. Going over to what we have at running back, you are looking at Jahmyr Gibbs, locked and loaded RB1. Joe Mixon, locked and loaded RB1. David Montgomery, low-end RB1, high-end RB2. We have plenty of running back depth at the bottom with Tracy, Zach Charbonnet, Jaylen Warren. So you're in a super comfortable spot here at running back. Receiver, we have Wilson, Debo, Addison. Wide receiver 3 is a little bit garbage. What does the waiver wire look like here? One thing that you could look to do is if you wanted to go get that meaningful upgrade at wide receiver, if you could potentially take Tracy and send him maybe with Ricky Pearsall to go get that wide receiver upgrade, I think that could be interesting just strictly because you are in a situation in which obviously we're never really starting Tracy here. It is a garbage offense. You are in a really, really comfortable situation when it comes to our running backs. So, I mean, if you wanted to pivot off Tracy and go to Pearsall, obviously we are going through and trying to attack those teams that potentially are really lackluster at the running back position. Trying to find some of those teams. There should be some in a 12-team format. This team, James Cook, Rachaad White, Ray Davis as their top options. I mean, if you could go Tyrone Tracy and Ricky Pearsall to get up to T. Higgins, I think that'd make a lot of sense. We're 4-3, so I think we can wait for Higgins to come back as well. This team is Rico Dowdle, Tank Bigsby as their RB2 and 3. So if you wanted to go with like Ricky Pearsall and Tyrone Tracy to try to get to Jalen Waddle, I would really like that. Try to get to Devontae Adams, I would really like that as well. Going over to Kincaid at tight end, we are chilling. I mean, the waiver wire doesn't have great options. Really don't think we make any waiver wire pivots. The only thing I think that you could possibly make an argument for is trying to trade Tracy in the depth receiver. I would say Addison. The issue is you're just simply not going to be able to get anything for Addison at this point to try to go get that upgrade at the wide receiver position, but I really appreciate it. The last thing I'm worried about is having both Detroit backs. Obviously, it's worked out great for us. Yeah, if the Lions offense implodes, then maybe it's going to be a tougher week, but Lions offense cruising. I mean, this week they project out to be the highest scoring team in the NFL. Obviously, phenomenal offensive line, the best offensive line in the NFL. So I think you go ahead. I think you leave the team as is, unless you want to see if we can squeeze Tracy with a wide receiver to go get some wide receiver upgrade. But I really appreciate you and I really hope I was able to help you on some way. Again, thank you so much for taking advantage of that free Underdog offer. Now, a Hogan always out here says, can't link a CBS league. This is a 2 running back, 2 receiver, and 2 flex format. So here, quarterback, we are going to be going with Hurts. 2 running backs, we're going to be going with the combo of Gibbs and... For the love of God, tell me we can go to the waiver wire. There's no way in hell you're asking me, do we play Jaleel McLaughlin or Antonio Gibson? We go Jaleel over Gibson, but I promise you there's a better option on waivers. Wide receiver, lock in Debo, Tyreek, and then going over to what we have in the flex spots, we're going to be going with Amari Cooper and Ladd McConkey. I definitely think in the long term you could pivot from Ladd to Jalen McMillan, but I would prefer to just wait a week and see what we get from McMillan before we make that call. Now, Abel coming out with our next question says, opponent has Lamar, Chubb, Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Diggs, Kincaid. Running back, Brees, Jacobs, auto starts. Receiver, Neighbors, Brian Thomas is a phenomenal team. Tight end, Komet versus Laporta. I really need your help with this. This is effectively the same thing that I am dealing with in the Flock League right now. I legitimately have Komet and Laporta. Can y'all please spam the chat right now? Would you rather play Cole Komet or Sam Laporta this week? Not only will this help this person, but it's going to help me as well. Are you going to go with Komet or Laporta? Please let me know. Komet, Laporta, Komet, Laporta, Komet, Laporta. Komet, Laporta, Komet. So it does look like it's split 50-50. How I have it set right now in my league is I have Komet as the guy. But this has been something that's been weighing on my mind. This has been something I've been thinking about. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be that surprised if I end up changing it. Just because, to be completely honest, I freaking have no idea. I have no idea. But I have Komet in right now. And then going over to the flex, I think you go ahead and you play DeAndre Swift in a great matchup. I mean, Jaden Reed gives you the higher ceiling, but I think you get a nice floor ceiling combo with Swift. But let me refresh this. And I think that should be it. I think we've gotten through all the questions. Obviously, we'll be answering. I'll be literally live streaming again in about 5 hours. So, yeah, I'm maybe going to get 4 hours sleep tonight. But let me go to bed so I can get ready for tomorrow's stream. Of course, if you wanted to get in any questions, you always can over on vlogfantasy.com. You don't even need to be in the live stream when it gets answered because we're going to send you the answer directly through the site as well. Hit that expert advice button in the top right corner. Send a super message, start sit question, trade question, or a team review. If you wanted that team review, I would highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have over there on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting that 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you're going to be getting a free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard for Monday night, and a free Dak Prescott pick, more than less than half a total yard for Sunday night as well. If you wanted that free team review, just make sure after you make a $10 deposit on Underdog, you go over to vlogfantasy.com and you set up an account with the same email address. That way I can go ahead and I know who to hook up with that free team review voucher. But much love. Really do appreciate y'all. Of course, Hook 'em Horns wasn't the best game, but at least we got the dub. And yeah, I really hope I get to see you out in the live stream tomorrow morning.